Chapter 1324. The first half of the Battle of Geniuses, the Battle of the Holy Emperor Realm, had finally come to an end. All the forces had returned home for the time being to prepare for the Battle of Zhangtian Island in 2 months. Yi Guqin also followed the Sword Dynasty's group and returned to the dynasty with his good friends. After returning to the dynasty, Yi Guqin also hosted a banquet for his friends. It could be said that without their help, Yi Guqin would have had a hard time obtaining the sacred emperor's inheritance. Yi Guqin's personality tended to be cold and unsociable. He was not good at taking the initiative to make friends with others. However, his charisma made a group of people willing to take the initiative to make friends with him. As for what would happen to Yi Guqin after the Battle of Geniuses, that was something to be considered in the future. Jun Xiaoyao and the others also believed that Yi Guqin would be able to turn the situation around. The banquet lasted for 3 days before it came to an end. Yi Guqin then continued to regulate his breath and cultivate. Yi Guqin sat alone in a pavilion in the palace of the Sword Dynasty. He took out a soul-luring lotus. The translucent soul-luring lotus refracted 7-colored light. Vaguely, waves of vigorous soul power undulations spread outwards. The soul-luring lotus is a top sacred medicine. Its rarity is no less than the tree of enlightenment in my body. Can this soul-luring lotus help people form a soul palace? Yi Guqin looked at it carefully. Then he took out a crystal coffin from his origin ring. It was the soul-accumulating coffin that Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was placed in. Su Qingyu had been in a state of hibernation ever since he absorbed the saint's soul crystal. The soul-luring lotus is precious, but I am indebted to Senior Su. Dugu Qima was personally refined by him. This soul-luring lotus should be helpful for the recovery of Senior Su's primordial spirit, Yi Guqin muttered to himself. Yi Guqin's principle was to seek revenge and repay kindness. This was Yi Guqin's principle. Moreover, there were 5 soul-luring lotuses. Giving one to Su Qingyu was not a big deal. Most importantly, Su Qingyu was Su Jianshir's father. He hoped that Su Jianshir would be reunited with Su Qingyu when he brought her back. Thinking of this, Yi Guqin directly opened the profound spirit coffin and put a soul-luring lotus inside. In an instant, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit, which was in a deep slumber, automatically released a force of absorption and refinement. The pure medicinal strength of the soul-guiding lotus was gradually being refined and absorbed. Yi Guqin put away the coffin again. I hope Senior wakes up soon, Yi Guqin thought to himself. After that, Yi Guqin continued to immerse himself in cultivation. After all, he had obtained the 1,000 Leaves Saint Emperor's inheritance, the 10,000 Swords divine technique. Even with Yi Guqin's monstrous talent in swordsmanship, it was not easy to cultivate a saint-level swordsmanship. The entire South Horizon region welcomed a brief period of peace. However, everyone knew that this was just the calm before the storm. 2 months later, the Battle of Sky Burial Island would begin. That would be a major event that would truly affect the South Horizon region. In a bustling city in the South Horizon region. In a restaurant, a white-haired old man with a red nose was holding a wine gourd and drinking nonstop. His body emitted a strong stench of alcohol, causing a group of people around him to stay far away. This old man has been drinking here for more than half a year. Is no one going to care about him? What's there to care about? Anyway, he paid for it. He can drink as much as he wants. It doesn't matter if he drinks himself to death. 2 waiters whispered to each other. At this moment, a group of burly men walked into the restaurant. Damn it, it's the Black Fiend Gang. When the customers in the restaurant saw this group of black-armored men, their expressions changed. The Black Fiend Gang was a gang that was like a local snake in this city. The leader of the black-armored men waved his hand and said, "Waiters, bring the wine." Yes, right away. The 2 waiters trembled as they ran to get the wine. The group of Black Fiend Gang members sat down. However, the old man with the red nose happened to be sitting in the center seat, and his body emitted a pungent and unpleasant smell. The leader of the black-armored men frowned and said coldly, "Old man, get out of my way." The old man with the red nose acted as if he didn't hear it and continued drinking from the wine gourd. "Hey, old man, are you looking for death?" A skinny monkey-like man stepped forward and pushed the old man with the red nose to the ground. The old man lay on the ground and continued drinking from the wine gourd. This old fart. The leader of the black-armored men felt a burst of anger in his heart. He lifted his foot, and the aura of a celestial palace supremacy burst forth. This leader of the Black Fiend gang was a supremacy with a strong cultivation base. The leader of the Black Fiend gang stepped on the head of the old man with the red nose. The other people in the restaurant all averted their gazes, revealing a pitiful expression. The old man with the red nose still didn't move. However, at this moment, an old man with a goatee and a linen robe appeared in the restaurant like a ghost. He grabbed the Black Fiend gang leader's leg with one hand and suddenly twisted. Crack! The scalp-numbing sound of bones cracking rang out, and the Black Fiend gang leader screamed in pain. "How dare you touch our leader?" The surrounding disciples of the Black Fiend gang roared and attacked together. However, the goatee elder only stomped one foot, and a terrifying burst of saint power erupted. The Black Fiend gang leader and the other members didn't even have the chance to struggle or fear before they exploded into balls of bloody foam. The entire restaurant was filled with blood. However, the goatee elder's linen robe wasn't stained with a single drop of blood. The others in the restaurant were all stunned, and their legs trembled. The famous Black Fiend gang was destroyed just like that? Even the leader of the Venerables exploded into a pile of flesh and blood. That power, could it be a saint? The teeth of the others in the restaurant were chattering. They had never seen such a major figure in their lives. However, what was even more shocking was yet to come. The old man with the red nose continued to drink as if he didn't see the scene in front of him. Seeing this, the goatee elder shook his head slightly and sighed. "Duan Tianfeng, you've been drinking for half a year. It's about time you woke up." If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely recognize this white-haired old man who drank all day long. It was the old drunkard, the South Forging Saint, Duan Tianfeng. After the incident at the Tianhuang Plains, even Duan Tianfeng thought that Yi Guchen had died. Duan Tianfeng felt extremely guilty when he saw the disciple he had painstakingly nurtured being unable to save him in the end. What made him even more powerless was that, although he was an 8-star Grandmaster Artificer, his current influence was far from what it used to be. With his hands crippled, he couldn't recover to his peak. This also made Duan Tianfeng unable to take revenge on the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Heavenly Godsword sect, and other overlord forces. All kinds of powerlessness made Duan Tianfeng very tired and exhausted. So, he had been holed up in this small city, ignoring the outside world and drinking all day long. "Grand Elder Yang, what are you doing here again?" Duan Tianfeng said as he drank. He didn't seem to care that Grand Elder Yang was a saint in front of him. "Ah, if I didn't come to find you, the entire divine artifact sect would have been controlled by Shao Gongshu and the Nangong family." Elder Yang sighed deeply. "What? Shao Gongshu lost?" A bone-deep hatred flashed through Duan Tianfeng's drunken old eyes. Chapter 1325. The words Shao Gongzi were engraved in Duan Tianfeng's bones. Duan Tianfeng, the South Forging Saint. Shao Gongzi, the North Yen Artifact Sovereign. From their titles, it was clear that the two were rivals, as if they were destined to counter each other. However, some people didn't know that the two had once been fellow disciples of the same sect. The sect they belonged to was called the Divine Artifact Sect. Although the Divine Artifact Sect wasn't listed in the One Mountain, One Sea, One Immortal Valley, or the Three Sects, for pavilions and 5 aristocratic families, it was still a sect with a terrifying foundation. From the name, one could tell that the Divine Artifact Sect was a sect that focused on forging weapons. A sect like this might not have as many top experts as the overlords. However, their foundation, connections, and resources were extremely abundant. It could be said that the Divine Artifact Sect could easily summon a group of tribulation saints to help them in battle. Even a Saint King would be able to move them. This was something that the overlords couldn't do. Moreover, even the overlord forces sometimes needed Divine Artifact Sect's services. Many of the swords, weapons, protective tools, and treasures of their disciples were also provided by the Divine Artifact sect. It was obvious that the Divine Artifact sect had an extraordinary status in the South Horizon region. The overlords might not be afraid of the Divine Artifact sect, but they didn't want to offend them for no reason. Duan Tianfeng and Xiao Gongzi were the two brightest stars of the Divine Artifact sect. However, in the end, they became enemies because of a woman. That woman was called Nangong Huajing. Duan Tianfeng frowned when he recalled those painful memories. He asked in a hoarse voice, "What are you talking about? What exactly is going on?" Elder Yang was the first elder of the Divine Artifact sect, Yang Qi, a saint. Yang Qi said, "The junior sect master selection of the Divine Artifact sect is about to begin. You know that Xiao Gongzi is from the strongest faction in the sect. Even I, the first elder's faction, can't compare to him. I'm afraid that only the sect master's faction can suppress Xiao Gongzi's faction." Duan Tianfeng fell silent at Yang Qi's words. After losing that bet, Duan Tianfeng's hands were crippled, his reputation and name abandoned. He left the Divine Artifact sect and wandered the world. If he hadn't left at that time, right now, Mo Tianfeng should be one of the leaders of Divine Artifact sect. Even so, Forging Tianfeng still held an extraordinary position in the Divine Artifact sect. After all, his previous qualifications, reputation, and standards were all here. As for his crippled hands, it wasn't that there was no way to heal them. It was only because of that bet that Mo Tianfeng could not treat his hands. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of the agreement. So, Xiao Gongshu wants his disciple to become the young sect master? Duan Tianfeng asked. Yang Qi nodded heavily and said, "Naturally. You should have heard of Master Zhao's disciple. He is the Nangong noble clan's genius, one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. It can be said that Nangong Juyun is the most talented junior I've ever seen." Yang Qi sighed deeply. There were quite a few forging geniuses in Divine Artifact sect, but compared to Nangong Juyun, they were like fireflies compared to the moon. Nangong Juyun was known as the Divine Armament Prince. From this, one could see how monstrous his talent in forging was. Furthermore, Nangong Juyun was born in the Nangong noble clan, an overlord clan. At the same time, in addition to his talent in forging, Nangong Juyun's strength also stood at the peak of the younger generation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to become one of the 10 young masters. Martial path and crafting path. His dual talents had created Nangong Juyun, who was surrounded by countless halos. Is there no one in Divine Artifact sect who can contend with Nangong Juyun? Duan Tianfeng asked. Almost none. Moreover, Xiao Gongshu wants Nangong Juyun to marry the daughter of the sect master, Gu Xiangling, after he becomes the young sect master. At that time, won't Divine Artifact sect fall under the control of Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong noble clan? Yang Qi said coldly. Nangong Juyun represented the Nangong noble clan. If he became the young sect master, he would definitely be the next sect master. This way, with Xiao Gongshu's help, the entire Divine Artifact sect would fall under someone else's control. This was not something Yang Qi wanted to see. At that time, where would the elders of Divine Artifact sect go? Would they have to listen to Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong noble clan? Is the sect master not going to say anything? Duan Tianfeng asked. Sigh. Yang Qi shook his head. What can the sect master do? Can he not choose the next sect master? This is the rule set by Divine Artifact sect. Even if the sect master doesn't want Nangong Juyun to take the position, he can't stop him. What's the point of telling me this? Do you want me to compete with Nangong Juyun? Duan Tianfeng laughed at himself. His only half-disciple, Yiguchen, had died in the Tianhuang Plains. He couldn't even fulfill his bet with Xiao Gongshu. How could he help Divine Artifact sect? Yang Qi was slightly taken aback by Duan Tianfeng's words. Of course I'm not asking you to compete. Didn't you take in a disciple? Yang Qi had heard that Duan Tianfeng had fought for Yi Guchen on the Tianhuang Plains. He had even called for Leng Qianhen and the others to help. However, Duan Tianfeng's face darkened when he heard this. These words were like tearing open a scar that had formed over his scab. Yang Qi, are you mocking me? Duan Tianfeng's face turned red. His eyes were filled with pain. Yang Qi was even more surprised. Duan Tianfeng, haven't you heard the recent rumors? Rumors? What rumors? Duan Tianfeng was stunned as well. He had been living in seclusion in this small city. He was always drunk and dejected. He didn't pay attention to the outside world and was almost cut off from the outside world. Your disciple Yi Guchen didn't die. He even appeared in the holy imperial world. His performance shocked everyone, Yang Qi said. What did you say? Say it again? Duan Tianfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body trembled and he stood up abruptly. His hands tightly gripped Yang Qi's arms, and his drunken eyes became incomparably sober. Your disciple didn't die. He changed his name and became Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty. Then, Yang Qi told Duan Tianfeng everything that had happened in the holy imperial world. In the end, Duan Tianfeng laughed at the sky. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Ha, I knew it. I knew it. My judgment can't be wrong. Yi Guchen didn't disappoint me. Ha. Duan Tianfeng lost his composure. He laughed crazily to vent the depression in his heart. He didn't think that Yang Qi would lie to him about this. Great, this is great. Duan Tianfeng's depression was swept away. He seemed to have recovered. Master Xiao lost. Your disciple, Nangong Jueyun, also lost. It's time to end this bet. Duan Tianfeng was excited. Chapter 1326. Only the heavens knew how happy Duan Tianfeng was when he heard the news. Yang Qi sighed when he saw Duan Tianfeng's state. He didn't want the former saint blacksmith to continue to be dispirited. The artifact sect needed Duan Tianfeng. As long as Duan Tianfeng could fulfill the bet, his hands could be healed again. By then, Duan Tianfeng would be back to his peak. Therefore, the artifact sect had never given up on Duan Tianfeng. Great. I can't wait to go to the Sword Dynasty to find that kid. He made me sad for so long. Duan Tianfeng's face was rosy. It was rare for him to be happy. But Yang Qi was not as happy as Duan Tianfeng. He hesitated for a while, then said, Your disciple is indeed powerful. He is unbeatable in the Saint Emperor world. Even Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion died in his hands. But what? Duan Tianfeng asked. But martial prowess does not represent the art of forging. The selection of the future master of the artifact sect is not a competition of martial prowess, but of forging. Compared to Nangong Jueyun, Yang Qi didn't finish his sentence because of Duan Tianfeng's emotions. But what he meant was that Yi Guchen might not be as good as Nangong Jueyun in forging. No, it was a possibility that was removed. In Yang Qi's mind, Yi Guchen was definitely not as good as Nangong Jueyun. But he couldn't say it out loud. What? Are you saying that my disciple is not as good as Nangong Jueyun? Duan Tianfeng snorted. He had guessed what Yang Qi was thinking. Yang Qi was embarrassed. He didn't know what to say. Don't worry. I can see that my disciple is obsessed with swords. I know his talent as well. Otherwise, why would I choose him? Duan Tianfeng said confidently. Back then, he was still an old drunkard in the Saint Origin Dynasty's Milky Way province. Back then, he told Yi Guchen that he would teach him the forbidden art of forging. He would use his soul to forge swords and cultivate both sword and life. Duan Tianfeng would never forget the passion in Yi Guchen's eyes at that time. He wasn't afraid of the forbidden art of forging that could threaten his life. Instead, he was excited, curious, and amazed. How could a person like him be ordinary on the path of smithing? Furthermore, Gong Tianfeng was certain that Yi Guchen hadn't thrown away his forging tools along the way. When he saw the confident look on Duan Tianfeng's face, Yang Qi could not understand why he was so confident in Yi Guchen. If it was a competition of strength, then Yang Qi had nothing to say. Yi Guchen was definitely first class. However, Yang Qi had never heard of Yi Guchen's monstrous achievements in smithing. But now, he had no choice but to treat a dead horse as a living horse. Since Mo Tianfeng had already decided on Yi Guchen, there was nothing he could do about it. All right then. Since you have decided on Duan Tianfeng, bring him to Heavenly Craftsmanship City. There are only a few days left before the competition for the position of Young Sect Master. Yang Qi waved his hand. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was a rather famous giant city in the South Horizon region. It was also where the Divine Artifact Sect was located. Duan Tianfeng nodded slightly. He couldn't wait any longer. Yi Guchen, I've placed all my hopes on you. Duan Tianfeng left the restaurant and looked into the distance. Duan Tianfeng had originally thought that he would never be able to fulfill the bet and defeat Elder Shao in this lifetime. Now, the heavens had given him another ray of hope. Elder Shao has lost. Although I lost to you back then, my disciple will definitely defeat your disciple. Duan Tianfeng muttered to himself in a resolute and decisive tone. The Sword Dynasty had fallen into a rare silence during this period. Yen Wushuang and the others from the Swallow Cloud Dynasty had also been staying in the Sword Dynasty. The Divine Condor and Blackie had also met with Yen Wushuang and the others. As for Yi Guchen, he had pushed aside all social activities and engrossed himself in cultivation. On this day, Zhao Xiaodi knocked on Yi Guchen's door. What's wrong? Yi Guchen looked up at Zhao Xiaodi and asked faintly. Zhao Shinkong had already returned to the War God Dynasty to prepare for the upcoming battle on Sky Burial Island. However, Zhao Xiaodi refused to return no matter what. She wanted to stay by Yi Guchen's side and fulfill the promise of being a maid. However, during this period of time, Zhao Xiaodi had indeed behaved like a sincere maid, which gave Yi Guchen a headache. However, after getting used to it for a few days, Yi Guchen could only let her be. There are two pieces of good news. Master, do you want to hear the good news first or the good news first? Zhao Xiaodi smiled mischievously. Go ahead. Yi Guchen spat out a word, his head aching. Given his cold personality, he really didn't get along with the eccentric Zhao Xiaodi. All right, the first piece of good news is that Master has replaced young Master Nebula, Gu Xiaoyang, as one of the new 10 great young masters, Sword Young Master. As Zhao Xiaodi spoke, a hint of amazement appeared in her big bright eyes. The 10 great young masters of the South Horizon region was definitely a title that countless geniuses revered. There were countless geniuses who wanted to become one of the 10 great young masters. Back then, Gu Xiaoyang had the ability to take the position and squeeze out young Master 3 lives to become young Master Nebula because he had obtained Yi Guchen's innate sword embryo. Now Yi Guchen, who had killed Gu Xiaoyang, automatically became one of the 10 great young masters. The 10 great young masters weren't fixed. If someone was defeated or killed, the victor would automatically succeed the throne. And if the winner was defeated by someone else, he would be replaced. Therefore, those who could occupy the 10 great young masters for a long time were called old masters with strong strength. Young Master Haotian Di Haotian, Young Master Xuanzhen Chu Xuanzhen, and Young Master Xiaoyao Jun Xiaoyao were all old masters. As for Gu Xiaoyang, he was just one of the new 10 great young masters. Oh, got it. Yi Guchen nodded lightly. His expression and reaction were very indifferent, even, he didn't care. Is this the reaction? Zhao Xiaodi was speechless. If it were other geniuses, it would be an honor to be able to become one of the 10 great young masters. But Yi Guchen didn't seem to care at all. It's just a title. I don't care about the title of 10 great young masters at all. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. Zhao Xiaodi couldn't help but admire him even more. What's the second news? Yi Guchen asked lightly. Zhao Xiaodi replied, an acquaintance of Master is looking for you. Oh, who is it? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows, looking curious. He used to be a famous figure, the South Forging Saint, Bing Tianfeng. Zhao Xiaodi said. What, Senior Bing Tianfeng? Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly flashed. He hurriedly got up and flashed out like a rainbow. Zhao Xiaodi was left alone in the same place. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Seriously, he didn't react at all when he heard that he was one of the 10 great young masters, but he reacted so strongly when he heard that an acquaintance was coming. Zhao Xiaodi muttered. But the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. But maybe this is Master's charm. He didn't care about fame and valued friendship. She finally understood why her brother Zhao Shinkong admired Yi Guqin so much. On the other side, Yi Guqin also arrived at a guest hall. When he saw the white-haired figure, Yi Guqin's heart stirred slightly and he felt a little emotional. Senior Bing Tianfeng, long time no see. Chapter 1327. When Duan Tianfeng saw Yi Guqin, excitement surfaced in his old eyes. In fact, there were even faint tears in his eyes, but he quickly covered them up. Good, you didn't disappoint me. Duan Tianfeng smiled. Thank you for lending me a helping hand at the Infinite Plains. Yi Guqin cupped his hands together sincerely and did not forget Duan Tianfeng's kindness. Duan Tianfeng was not only his mentor in smithing, but he had also helped him a lot at the Infinite Plains. Back then, many people did not dare to intervene when they were pressured by the overlord forces, but Duan Tianfeng dared to step forward. Moreover, if it was not for Duan Tianfeng, Leng Qianhen and the rest would not have appeared to help him. In terms of smithing, you are half my disciple. How could I not help you? Unfortunately, I don't have such great ability. Duan Tianfeng shook his head. Senior, it's enough that you have the heart, Yi Guqin said with a smile. Next, the two of them exchanged pleasantries. After all, Duan Tianfeng was someone Yi Guqin knew earlier. They had known each other since the Sky River province. So much time has passed. You, who lost your sword embryo in the Saint Origin dynasty, have also reached this stage and become one of the top 10 young masters in the South Sky region. Duan Tianfeng could not help but exclaim. He had witnessed Yi Guqin's growth along the way. He was a good-for-nothing young man who lost his sword embryo in a low-level dynasty. Now, he had become the famous sword young master in the South Sky region, Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty. Only Yi Guqin knew how difficult it was. After that, Yi Guqin treated Duan Tianfeng to a feast and Leng Qianhen also came to meet him. After eating and drinking, Duan Tianfeng seemed to be thinking about something and hesitated. Senior, what's the matter? Yi Guqin could tell that Duan Tianfeng seemed to have something on his mind. This. Duan Tianfeng stammered. Previously, when he rushed to the Sword Dynasty, he wanted Yi Guqin's help. However, Yi Guqin still had a heavy burden on his shoulders. He had to prepare for the battle on Burial Sky Island 2 months later. If he let Yi Guqin do this now, would it delay his cultivation? Therefore, Duan Tianfeng was hesitant. Yi Guqin frowned when he saw Duan Tianfeng's reaction. Senior, there's no need to talk about our relationship. You're treating me like an outsider by hiding it like this. Duan Tianfeng was startled hearing this, before he burst out laughing while shaking his head. Hee, you're right. I'll tell you about it first. Afterwards, Duan Tianfeng told Yi Guqin about Divine Artifact Sect and the competition for the position of Junior Sect Master. So that's how it is. The competition for the position of Junior Master of the Divine Artifact Sect. Yi Guqin murmured. Yi Guqin had heard of Divine Artifact Sect before. Although they weren't part of the 3 sects, 4 pavilions, and 5 aristocratic families, their foundation and influence weren't any weaker than the overlord forces. Yi Guqin hadn't expected Duan Tianfeng to be from Divine Artifact Sect. What was even more unexpected was that Duan Tianfeng was actually a disciple of the same sect as Xiao Gongshu. Divine Artifact Prince, Nangong Ju Yun. I heard that he cultivates both the martial path and the path of tools. He's a top genius of the Nangong aristocratic family, one of the overlord aristocratic families, Yi Guqin said. Duan Tianfeng sighed softly when he heard this. Indeed. Xiao Gongshu's eye for talent isn't bad. He's chosen a good disciple. There aren't many people in Divine Artifact Sect who can compete with Nangong Ju Yun. Yi Guqin fell into deep thought. Duan Tianfeng sighed deeply. Yi Guqin, the most important thing for you now is to prepare for Sky Burial Island. If you participate in this competition, not only will you be wasting time, you might even become enemies with Nangong Ju Yun. Duan Tianfeng really wanted to win the bet and let his disciple defeat Xiao Gongshu's disciple. However, the prerequisite was that this wouldn't affect Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin shook his head when he heard this. Senior, what kind of person do you think I am? When Yi Guqin inherited Senior's forbidden art of forging, I promised that I would fulfill Senior's wish. And this time, it's the best opportunity. How can this ye miss it? Duan Tianfeng's expression froze slightly. There was a gratified look in his eyes. Xiao Gongshu had a good eye for choosing disciples. However, Duan Tianfeng wasn't bad either. Moreover, it's about time to forge my own famed sword. Yi Guchen's eyes glowed. His innate sword embryo had become an innate indestructible sword embryo after fusing with Yizangyue's immortal divine embryo. It could be used as the core for forging a famed sword. In addition, he had also collected a few sacred materials. It was about time for him to start forging a sword embryo. Yi Guchen didn't plan to forge a divine weapon comparable to a famed sword in one go. It was impossible. Even Duan Tianfeng and Xiao Gongshu couldn't do it. Yi Guchen planned to slowly upgrade the sword embryo after forging it. As long as he persevered, he could eventually forge a famed sword that belonged to Yi Guchen. Senior, pack up. We'll go to Heavenly Craftsmanship City in a few days, Yi Guchen said. Okay. Duan Tianfeng nodded repeatedly. There was a rare hint of excitement in his old eyes. After being dispirited for so many years, he finally saw the dawn of revenge. In the next few days, after Yi Guchen took care of some chores, he also set off with Duan Tianfeng on a ship. This time, Yi Guchen didn't bring anyone else because the other sword sons had to prepare for the Battle of Zhangtian Island. Jun Xiaoyao, Yan Wushuang, and the others also went to prepare for the battle. Yi Guchen even forced Zhao Xiaodi to stay in the Sword Dynasty and did not allow her to go with him. In the end, only the Divine Condor and Xiao He followed Yi Guchen. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was a famous city in the Nantian region. It covered a large area. Although it was called a city, its area was comparable to that of a small dynasty. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was also where the artifact sect was located. It could be said that in the Nantian region, even the overlord-level forces didn't want to offend the artifact sect if it wasn't necessary. The artifact sect had always maintained a neutral stance among the various sections. This time, the selection of the junior sect master of the artifact sect had caused quite a stir in the Nantian region. After all, the person who would be selected as the junior sect master this time was very likely to be Nangong Jueyun. Nangong Jueyun was the genius of the Nangong family. This made many people wonder if the artifact sect would belong to the Nangong family in the future. This wasn't something that the other overlord-level forces wanted to see. Therefore, during this period, many people poured into Heavenly Craftsmanship City, wanting to see who the junior sect master of the artifact sect would be. After a few days, Yi Guchen and Duan Tianfeng finally arrived at Heavenly Craftsmanship City. Is that Heavenly Craftsmanship City? Yi Guchen stood on the deck of the flying boat and looked into the distance. He was shocked to see the giant city that stretched as far as the eye could see. The city walls of Heavenly Craftsmanship City were dozens of feet tall, like a towering mountain wall. The giant arched door at the city gate was also dozens of feet tall. The artifact sect is rich in resources. Apart from the overlord-level forces, not many forces can build such a giant city. Duan Tianfeng chuckled. After all, he used to be a member of the artifact sect. It was impossible for him to not have any feelings for the artifact sect. He still felt proud of it. It seems that I have underestimated the artifact sect's resources. Yi Guchen sighed. If you can defeat Nangong Jueyun this time and obtain the junior sect master's position, you might be able to relieve your current pressure. Duan Tianfeng said. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered when he heard this. If he could really obtain the support of the artifact sect, it would be very beneficial for Yi Guchen's current situation. However, the prerequisite was that he had the ability to defeat Nangong Jueyun. Chapter 1328. Looks like I'll have to do my best, Yi Guchen thought to himself. His original intention in coming to Heavenly Craftsmanship City was to help Duan Tianfeng complete the bet and defeat Xiao Gong's disciple to fulfill his wish. However, it would also be beneficial to him if he could seize the position of junior sect master. However, Yi Guchen didn't have much hope for this. After all, his current identity was a little sensitive. Many overlord forces were eyeing him covetously. Even if Yi Guchen could win in the end, Divine Artifact Sect might not be willing to make Yiguchen the junior sect master. That would be inviting trouble to themselves. Yiguchen thought to himself as he entered the city with Duan Tianfeng. Duan Tianfeng had mixed feelings when he saw this city that he hadn't seen for a long time. After losing the bet with Xiao Gong, Duan Tianfeng crippled his own hands and left Divine Artifact Sect. Since then, he had been wandering the world and hadn't returned to Heavenly Craftsmanship City even once. However, now wasn't the time to be sentimental. The competition for the junior sect master position wouldn't last long. After that, Duan Tianfeng and Yiguchen found an inn. Yiguchen, I'm going to find Divine Artifact Sect's Grand Elder to understand some things. You can go to the Heavenly Craftsmanship path to train. As long as you pass and become a 2-star blacksmith, you can become a disciple of Divine Artifact Sect, Duan Tianfeng advised. It turned out that one had to be a disciple of Divine Artifact Sect to participate in the competition for the junior sect master position. Divine Artifact Sect couldn't just let an outsider participate in the competition. Moreover, because Divine Artifact Sect was a blacksmithing sect, the way they recruited disciples was different from other sects and factions. Divine Artifact Sect had set up a place called the Heavenly Craftsmanship Path in Heavenly Craftsmanship City. This place was specifically used to test the blacksmith's rank and cultivation. As long as one could pass the test and obtain a 2-star blacksmith rating, they could become a disciple of Divine Artifact Sect directly. This was valid at all times. I understand. Yiguchen nodded slightly. To be honest, he didn't know what his blacksmith rank was. However, his blacksmithing skills hadn't fallen behind along the way. After giving some instructions, Duan Tianfeng went out to look for Yang Qi. On the other side, Yiguchen took the Divine Condor and Little Black out to the Heavenly Craftsman Road. I'm going to the Heavenly Craftsman Path's trial, you guys can stroll around by yourselves. Yiguchen said. It was inconvenient to bring them along to the Heavenly Craftsman Path's trial. All right, let's walk around on our own, the Divine Condor replied. Now, the Divine Condor was also a 6th-rank demonic beast, comparable to the top human Divine Palace realm experts. As for Xiao He, he had the indestructible demonic body of the chaotic world demonic ape. So, no one could hurt him unless a sage expert intervened. Yiguchen was relieved to let them wander around. Soon after, Yiguchen inquired about the location of the Heavenly Arts Road from passers-by. On the other hand, the Divine Condor and Blackie were wandering around aimlessly. Not long after, they arrived at a remote lakeside. There was a peach blossom tree by the lakeside. Under the peach blossom tree, a woman in an apricot-colored dress was staring at the surface of the lake with a depressed look on her face. The woman in the apricot-colored dress was very beautiful. Her eyebrows were picturesque and her skin was smoother than snow. She was leaning against the peach blossom tree. The petals of the peach blossom fell on her shoulders, adding to her beauty. It's a pretty big sister. The Divine Condor's eyes lit up. They happened to be bored, so they eagerly walked up to her. Hey, demonic beasts! The woman in the apricot-colored dress also noticed the arrival of the Divine Condor and Blackie. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. However, the Divine Condor didn't show his true form at the moment. He looked fist-sized, fiery red and furry, which made him quite cute. No woman could resist him. Although Blackie was a little dull, its fur was smooth, making it look charmingly naive. Big sister, why are you here alone? The Divine Condor's beady eyes glinted as he spoke cutely. He can talk. The woman in the apricot-colored dress was even more surprised. She hadn't seen many demonic beasts that were so intelligent. I can see that you are depressed. Why don't you tell me what's on your mind? The Divine Condor flapped his wings. A bitter smile appeared on the woman's face, but it was soon replaced by a self-deprecating one. She had been very depressed these days. Now she finally had someone to talk to. So what if they were just 2 demonic beasts? At that moment, the woman said, if you want to marry a man who is perfect in every aspect, but he is using you for his own personal gain, what should you do? The Divine Condor heard this and said, of course you won't marry him. If only you could be so straightforward. The woman in the apricot-colored dress shook her head slightly. That handsome man in a blue robe with cloud patterns seemed to appear in her mind again. He was perfect, but he only wanted to use her. At this moment, a man in luxurious clothes suddenly walked over from afar. Seeing the man in luxurious clothes, the woman's beautiful eyes faintly showed annoyance. "Miss Gu, I finally found you." The man in luxurious clothes saw the beauty under the peach blossom tree and smiled faintly. His eyes were also filled with amazement. However, this woman was already taken. He couldn't think about her. "What's the matter?" The woman said coldly. "Young master invites you to a small gathering." The man in luxurious clothes smiled faintly. "No." The woman shook her head. "Miss Gu, my young master is sincerely inviting you. You should give him face." The man in luxurious clothes revealed a playful smile. This woman was already his young master's plaything, but she was still so disobedient. The final result hasn't been decided yet, and he's already holding a celebration party? The woman sneered. "Is there any doubt about the result? My young master will definitely come out on top." The man in luxurious clothes said confidently. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. "Where did this lackey come from? Don't disturb miss, okay?" Hearing the word lackey, the man in luxurious clothes' face darkened. He looked toward the voice. His gaze fell on the fluffy red bird that the woman was playing with in her hand. "A talking beast?" The man in luxurious clothes said coldly. "You beast, you're courting death." The divine condor's feathers stood on end. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of blazing flames. Don't forget that the divine condor was now a 6th-rank demonic beast. It was comparable to a top human divine palace realm expert. No matter how strong the man in luxurious clothes was, he couldn't withstand the divine condor's flames. He was immediately engulfed by the flames. His hair and eyebrows were burnt. He was in a sorry state and his skin turned black. The man in luxurious clothes screamed. At this moment, Blackie flashed, and as if it had turned into a bolt of black lightning, it threw a punch at the man in luxurious clothes. The man in luxurious clothes cried out in pain. His eyes were black like a panda's. In the end, the man was beaten to the ground. He was in a sorry state. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His luxurious clothes were burnt black. The woman covered her mouth with her hand and revealed a rare smile. She obviously didn't expect these two adorable pets to be so powerful. "Damn it, you two beasts. Don't let me see you next time." The man in luxurious clothes got up and fled in a sorry state. He didn't forget to curse. Where did this idiot come from? With such intelligence, the master behind this must be no better, the divine condor muttered. Hearing this, the woman burst into laughter. Her beautiful face was like a blooming flower. "Don't worry, Mississippi. My young master might be able to get you out of this predicament." The divine condor patted its chest and said. Chapter 1329. Your young master? The woman raised her eyebrows slightly as a look of surprise appeared in her beautiful eyes. She had seen the strength of the divine eagle and Blackie. What kind of person was the young master behind them? However, the woman shook her head when she thought of the young man who could become the young master and marry her. "Thank you, but the young master you speak of can't help me." The woman shook her head. Her name was Gu Xiangling. The young man who was going to become the young master and marry her was Nangong. He was one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. In Gu Xiangling's eyes, how many people in the South Horizon region were qualified to compete with Nangong Juyun? Not to mention, Nangong Juyun was a monster in forging. As the daughter of the sect leader of the divine weapon sect, she had been influenced since she was young and had extraordinary talent in forging. However, she could only admit defeat in front of Nangong Juyun. Therefore, Gu Xiangling treated the divine eagle's words as a consolation. You don't believe me? My young master is very powerful. There shouldn't be many geniuses in the South Horizon region who can put on airs in front of him." The divine eagle clicked its tongue. "Oh, is that so? Thank you for your kind intentions, but there's really no need." Your young master can't defeat him. Gu Xiangling shook her head again. She instinctively thought that the divine eagle was bragging. The young master behind the divine eagle might be a genius from a big family or a big dynasty. Even so, he was still far from being comparable to Nangong Juyun. There was no comparison at all. All right then, but I still have to remind you that my young master is really powerful. The divine eagle clicked its tongue. He had severely injured Di Haoyan, killed Gu Xiaoyang in the sacred imperial world, and became one of the 10 young masters, becoming the sword young master. There shouldn't be many geniuses like him in the South Horizon region. I know. Gu Xiangling smiled helplessly. How was he going to explain to this little bird that her marriage partner wasn't someone that anyone had the right to provoke? On the other side, Yiguchen also came to the Heaven's Works Road after asking around. As far as the eye could see, the Heavenly Craftsman Road was an extremely large building. Yiguchen walked straight in. There was an outer sect female disciple of Divine Artifact Sect at the door. She was tall and slender and had a pretty face. She was currently napping on a table. Because the Heaven's Craftsman path could come and challenge them at any time, there wouldn't be a situation where the flow of people would explode. Therefore, most of the time, the Heavenly Arts path was rather deserted. Moreover, the attention of Heavenly Craftsmanship City had been focused on the selection of the junior sect master of Divine Artifact Sect. Therefore, at this time, there were even fewer people coming to the Heaven's Craftsman path to train. Dare I ask, miss, how should I go about this Heavenly Works path? Yiguchen asked calmly. The female disciple who was dozing off opened her sleepy eyes and saw Yiguchen's young face. Her thin eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Another hothead who wants to try his luck, the female disciple muttered to herself. She appeared to be rather impatient. After all, she had seen many young people like him. They were all here to try their luck. If he was lucky enough to become a 2-star blacksmith, he would be able to join the Divine Artifact Sect as an outer disciple. However, in most cases, many people couldn't even reach 1 star. To enter the Heaven's Craftsman path, you need to pay 10,000 heaven crystals. There are 3 stages in the Heaven's Craftsman path, and each stage has a rating. If you walk out at the end and reach the 2-star standard, you will automatically be given a 2-star blacksmith token, the female disciple said. 2-star blacksmiths can become outer sect disciples? Then what about 3-star blacksmiths? Yiguchen asked. 3-star blacksmiths are inner sect disciples, the female disciple said with a frown. What about 4-star or 5-star blacksmiths? Yiguchen continued to ask. The female disciple raised her eyebrows, and the impatience on her face could no longer be concealed. She said coldly, I say, can you not bite off more than you can chew? Isn't it good to be down to earth and pass the stages honestly? Do you think you're the divine weapon prince, Nangong Juyun? Previously, when he challenged the Heavenly Craftsman path, he directly obtained a 5-star blacksmith's token. Who knows how much stronger he is now? Why don't you compete with him and obtain a 5-star blacksmith's token? The female disciple no longer concealed her impatience. There were always people who didn't know their own limits. They didn't have much ability, but their ambitions were higher than the sky. Yiguchen's face also turned cold. His origin ring flashed as he threw down 10,000 heaven crystals and directly stepped into the Heaven's Craftsman path. TSK, another person whose pride has been pierced. Does he really think that anyone can be Nangong Ju? Thinking of Nangong Juyun, the female disciple's eyes lit up. He could be said to be the dream of many young girls. Family background, appearance, identity, martial arts, and smithing skills, he was almost invincible. Just as the female disciple was infatuated, she suddenly realized something. Oh no, I forgot to record that person's information. But forget it, he's so young, he probably isn't even a 2-star blacksmith yet. The female disciple thought for a moment, then shook her head and didn't pursue the matter. On the other hand, Yiguchen had already stepped into the Heaven's Craftsman path. The Heaven's Craftsman path was divided into 3 stages. The first stage tested a blacksmith's basic skills and the number of times they could forge. In front of Yiguchen, a silver-colored metal the size of a boulder appeared. This silver-colored metal was extremely difficult to forge. Ordinary metals could only be hammered once, but this metal required at least 3 times. However, as the number of times it was hammered increased, its size would also slowly decrease. The number of times I can forge is a basic skill. I wonder how many times I can forge now, Yiguchen thought to himself. He had already prepared a supreme-grade forging hammer in his origin ring. Next, Yiguchen began to forge rapidly. The silver-colored metal was slowly shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The number of times he hammered the metal also skyrocketed like a blowout. The time limit for the first stage was 1 day. Forging for 24 hours was obviously a test of endurance for a blacksmith. However, this didn't affect Yiguchen much. Ancient god body, leakless divine palace, and chaotic sea of consciousness. Regardless of whether it was his physical body, true chi, or mind, they were all at their peak. In the end, Yiguchen's number of times he hammered the metal broke through 1 million. Only 1 million. It's far from my limit. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. This was because he only had 1 day. If he was given a few more days, the number would be even more terrifying. After all, Yiguchen was already able to forge 200,000 times a long time ago. Now, 1 million times was really nothing. Next, Yiguchen directly rushed to the second stage. As for the final result, it would only be given after passing 3 stages. The second stage tested the method of controlling fire. What Yiguchen faced was a flaming purgatory. Within it, 10 fire dragons were rolling and bobbing up and down. Every fire dragon was formed from a different kind of heaven and earth unique flame. This stage tested the blacksmith's control and mastery of fire. Interesting. 2 pitch-black flames rose in Yiguchen's eyes. The heart demon flame of nirvana was refined. Chapter 1330. The test of the Heaven's Works path was indeed difficult for ordinary blacksmiths. If there were 100 people challenging the Heaven's Works path at the same time, then it would be good if there were 1 or 2 people who could successfully obtain a 2-star blacksmith token. As for the highest grade token, the number of people who could obtain it was even rarer. This was also why that female disciple looked down on Yiguchen. There were too many people who came to try their luck and were eliminated. But it was a pity that Yiguchen had inherited the true teachings of forging Tianfeng. His forging skills had never fallen behind. At this moment, in the second test of the Heaven's Works path, Yiguchen was controlling the heart demon flame to fight against the 10 fire dragons. He used an exquisite fire control technique to turn the heart demon flame into streaks of silk that wrapped around the fire dragon. The blazing flames rolled, but Yiguchen's expression was calm. In the end, a total of 8 fire dragons were annihilated by Yiguchen's heart demon flame. Then, Yiguchen came to the third test of the Heaven's Works path. There were 100 stone blocks as far as the eye could see. On each stone block, there was a type of metal mineral placed. The third test was to use these 100 types of metal minerals to fuse together to form a new metal. The more the number, the better the result. Yiguchen smiled faintly. He was the best at this kind of test. After all, he had already flipped through the Heaven's Works mineral collection that forging Tianfeng gave him. Next, Yiguchen took out the casting hammer and began to forge. Time passed. Outside, the female disciple was still lying on the table in boredom, her hand supporting her chin. There's no movement from the Heaven's Works path. Did that kid just give up on the test and leave? The female disciple mumbled. The 3 tests of the Heaven's Works path could be seen as a path. The place where the female disciple was at was the entrance. If one gave up midway, they could directly walk out from the other end of the path. Of course, if they succeeded, they would also be rewarded with a blacksmith token at the end of the path. But in the eyes of the female disciple, Yiguchen had most likely given up and silently left. I've already told you not to bite off more than you can chew at such a young age. There are millions of geniuses in the South Horizon region, but only 10 of them can become the 10 great young masters. Do you think everyone is like Nangong Juyun? The female disciple shook her head and smiled. However, at this moment, the entire Heavenly Craftsman Road suddenly emitted a series of noises. What's going on? The female disciple was startled like a frightened rabbit. A light screen lit up in midair, and a voice sounded at the same time. You have successfully cleared the trial. You have received a 6-star blacksmith token. This voice was incomparably majestic, spreading from the heavenly arts path to all directions. Not to mention the female disciples, everyone within 100 miles of the heavenly craftsman path could hear it. This voice came from the heavenly craftsman path. Someone has successfully passed the heavenly craftsman path and obtained a 6-star blacksmith token. How long has it been since a 6-star blacksmith appeared in the heavenly craftsman path? Which senior is it? The commotion caused by the heavenly craftsman road shocked many people in the city. They didn't expect that at this critical juncture, there would actually be such a blacksmith master appearing. As for the female disciple in the hall, her face was incomparably pale, and her eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Impossible, how could it be that youth? Even if he started cultivating in his mother's womb, it's impossible for him to be a 6-star blacksmith. The female disciple was completely stupefied, as if she was struck by lightning. Although she found it hard to believe, she couldn't deceive herself. Because only Yiguchen alone had entered the heavenly craftsman path. Other than him, it was impossible for a second person to pass the trial. And most importantly, Yiguchen was simply too young. At this age, it was already rare to see a 2-star blacksmith, let alone a 6-star blacksmith master. This was even more terrifying than Nangong Ju Yun's results from the heavenly craftsman path. Not good, I still haven't recorded that youth's identity. The female disciple thought of this, and her face was as pale as paper. She hurriedly rushed to the other end of the heavenly craftsman path. However, when she arrived, there was no one there. What kind of existence did I miss? The female disciple stood in a daze, her body trembling like a quail. If a genius had passed the heavenly craftsman path, she would have recorded it and sent the information to the divine artifact sect. Then she would have received a generous reward. Not to mention that youth was very likely to be an extremely monstrous 6-star blacksmith master. If this news was sent back to the divine artifact sect, the rewards she would receive would be unimaginable. However, all of this had gone down the drain because of her lazy and impatient attitude. At this moment, the female disciple's heart was filled with regret and a trace of fear. If that monstrous youth joins the divine artifact sect, I'm finished. The female disciple's mouth was filled with bitterness and anxiety. Moreover, even if he didn't join, the female disciple wouldn't have a good ending. After all, many people in the area knew that a 6-star blacksmith had appeared in the heavenly craftsman path, and it would probably spread to the divine artifact sect soon. When the female disciple couldn't produce Yiguchen's identity, it was easy to imagine how severe the punishment would be. The female disciple's heart was filled with regret at the thought of this. On the other side, Yiguchen had already left the heavenly craftsman path. He was toying with a golden token in his hand. There were 6 golden stars on it and the image of a blacksmith hammer below it. A 6-star blacksmith master? I didn't think that I would have reached this level, Yiguchen muttered to himself. In truth, the rank of a blacksmith didn't have much to do with one's cultivation. For example, Mo Tianfeng's strength wasn't at the top. He was only a venerable. However, he was an 8-star blacksmith master that even saints had to treat with respect. Therefore, it was normal for Yiguchen to be a 6-star blacksmith master with his strength. However, Yiguchen wasn't complacent. That Nangong Jueyun was already a 5-star blacksmith when he challenged the heavenly craftsman path a long time ago. He must be even stronger now. I can't underestimate him. Yiguchen thought to himself as he put away the token. Mo Tianfeng only asked him to take a 2-star blacksmith token so that he could directly become an outer disciple of the divine artifact sect. Now, Yiguchen directly took a 6-star blacksmith token. In the divine artifact sect, this level was barely at the level of an elder. It was beyond the scope of a disciple. It's a pity that the heart demon flame isn't enough for me now. If I can get a more powerful rare flame, it should be more helpful for my blacksmithing. Yiguchen shook his head slightly, feeling that it was a pity. The heart demon flame had been with him for a long time. Among the rare flames, The quality of the heart demon flame was considered quite good. However, it hadn't reached the peak yet. As for Nangong Jueyun, as the prodigy of an overlord clan and the disciple of Shao Gongxing, the rare flame he had was obviously not bad. Yiguchen wanted to upgrade his rare flame. However, this kind of thing depended on luck. It could only be found by chance. By the way, I heard that there are some trading areas in the Heavenly Craftsman City. I can go take a look later. Let's go back to the inn first. Yiguchen thought to himself as he turned back to the inn. Chapter 1331. When Yiguchen returned to the inn, he saw the divine Condor and Blackie. Ah, I met a beautiful lady today. Unfortunately, she's going to be forced to marry a man she doesn't like. The divine Condor sighed. Why are you concerned about this? Yiguchen shook his head and smiled. After all, they were of different species. She's so beautiful that I can't help her. Boy, why don't you go and save her? The divine Condor flapped its wings and said, I don't have time for that. Come with me to the trading zone tomorrow, Yiguchen said. Okay, the divine Condor replied. In a famous luxurious pavilion in the Heavenly Craftsman City, a man whose entire body was charred black and was in an extremely sorry state hurriedly walked up to the first floor of the pavilion. Inside the pavilion, there was good wine and delicious food. Many young men and women were toasting each other. They all raised their cups and toasted to the young man in the middle of the table. The man in the middle of the table was wearing a blue robe with cloud patterns. His face was handsome and his hair was tied up with a jade crown. He looked elegant. His eyes were incomparably deep. What was more strange was that there seemed to be two flames of different colors in his eyes. One was golden and the other was silver. This man was one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. Senior brother Nangong, you're definitely going to be the young sect master this time. An inner disciple of the divine weapon sect raised his cup and toasted. Ah, don't be so sure. There are still people in the divine weapon sect who are qualified to compete for the young sect master position. Nangong Juyun smiled faintly. Although they were modest words, the aloof and calm faintly revealed from the corners of his eyes and brows revealed his true feelings. Senior brother Nangong is truly modest. Even that Song Feichen is absolutely unable to compare to senior brother Nangong, said another woman. Her eyes were filled with adoration for Nangong Juyun. Song Feichen was the most talented forger in the younger generation of the divine weapon sect besides Nangong Juyun. If there was anyone who could stop Nangong Juyun from becoming the young sect master, Song Feichen was probably the only one. Before Yang Qi had gone to look for Duan Tianfeng, he had also placed all his bets on Song Feichen. That's not necessarily true. Nangong Juyun smiled modestly. At this moment, a disheveled man stumbled in from the door. It was the man in luxurious clothes who had gone to look for Gu Xiangling. Nangong Yuan, what's going on? I told you to invite Xiang Ling. Why did it turn out like this? Nangong Juyun slightly frowned when he saw that. Young master, she doesn't know what's good for her. Not only did she refuse the invitation, she even allowed the demonic beast to injure me, Nangong Yuan said angrily with a bitter face. I see. It's fine if she doesn't want to come. The end result will be the same anyway, Nangong Juyun said indifferently. He took the position of young sect master and married Gu Xiangling just to consolidate his position. Furthermore, Gu Xiangling herself could be considered a rather beautiful woman, so Nangong Juyun was not disgusted at having such a beautiful wife for free. As for Gu Xiangling rejecting him, Nangong Juyun did not mind, because he believed that love would grow with time. Alright, let's not make things unpleasant. Everyone, drink to your heart's content, Nangong Juyun said with a smile. After 3 rounds of drinking, a disciple of the artifact sect suddenly said, Senior brother Nangong, do you know the hottest thing in the South Horizon region recently? You mean the battle at the Sacred Emperor Realm? Nangong Juyun took a sip of wine and said, That's right. I didn't think that Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty would be Yiguchen, the one who once obtained the God Devourer sword. He's in the limelight now and has even become one of the 10 young masters, young master sword, the disciple said with a sigh. Another female disciple said hesitantly, "But I heard that Yi Guchen seems to be related to that person." The female disciple did not say who it was. But all the disciples of the artifact sect knew. She was referring to the Southern Refinement Sacred Hand, the Heaven Forging Edge. In the artifact sect, this was a taboo name that could not be talked about. That was because Shao Gongqing, the emperor of the North Yen artifact, was one of the leaders of the artifact sect. He hated it the most when people mentioned the Forging Heaven Edge in front of him. As Shao Gongqing's disciple, Nangong Juyun must have some opinions on this matter. Nangong Juyun shook his head and said, "I know. You mean that Yi Guchen is Tianfeng's disciple. But it's not a big deal. I admit that he's quite strong since he was able to kill Gu Xiaoyang. But how good is his forging ability? At least, I've never heard of his achievements in forging." "That's true. We're overthinking it. Yi Guchen probably doesn't know about the artifact sect." "That's right. So what if he knows? Is he going to come and compete with senior brother Nangong for the position of junior master?" "That's right. That's ridiculous. I think that Yi Guchen is already a 3-star blacksmith." Haha. At the banquet, many disciples of the artifact sect mocked Yi Guchen and tried to curry favor with Nangong Juyun. Nangong Juyun didn't care at all. In his opinion, no matter if it was Song Feichen or Yi Guchen, there was no way they could beat him in terms of forging. Because he had inherited Shao Gongqing's divine-grade forging art. At the same time, in a secluded courtyard of the artifact sect, Tan Feng also met with First Elder Yang Qi. "It seems that you still chose Yi Guchen." Yang Qi sighed softly. "That's right. He's the one I chose. I believe in him." Tian Feng swore. "Since it's your choice, I won't interfere. However, I'll still place my hopes on Song Feichen. He's the only person in the artifact sect who has a chance of beating Nangong Juyun." Yang Qi said, "Heh, I've already sent Yi Guchen to the Heavenly Crafts Path." Tian Feng said, "Heavenly Crafts Path? So what? Can he get 3 or 4 stars?" Yang Qi shook his head. But at this moment, a disciple of the artifact sect hurried in and cupped his hands. Reporting to First Elder, "The Heavenly Crafts Path." "Path?" the disciple stuttered, his face flushed red. He was clearly very excited. "What's going on? Don't panic. Speak." Yang Qi said, "Someone from the Heavenly Crafts Path has become a 6-star artificer." The disciple said, "What?" Yang Qi's mind shook. He couldn't recover from the shock. The disciple continued, "And according to the news from the disciples stationed at the Heavenly Crafts Path, the person who challenged the Heavenly Crafts Path seems to be a young man." These words almost made Yang Qi's breathing stop. What did this mean? Could another monster like Nangong Juyun have appeared? One had to know that even Song Feichen was only a 5-star artificer right now. What about that person? Did he leave anything behind? Yang Qi's breathing quickened. His face was filled with excitement. Was that young man sent by the heavens to help them deal with Nangong Juyun? That young man seemed to have left. The disciples stationed at the Heavenly Crafts Path didn't leave any information about him. The disciple lowered his head and replied, "What? Damned idiot. Give that disciple 1,000 whips and expel him from the artifact sect. Also, hurry up and find that young man." Yang Qi shouted. His face was flushed red from anger. But at this moment, a laugh suddenly rang out. "Yang Qi, you don't need to waste any more effort." The person who spoke was Tian Feng. "Tian Feng. How can we let go of such a monstrous artificer?" Yang Qi frowned. "No, what I mean is that you don't need to look for him at all. Because..." Tian Feng chuckled. Yang Qi was stunned at first, then he suddenly came back to his senses and took a deep breath. "You mean, could it be?" Chapter 1332. When he thought of this possibility, Yang Qi's body trembled in disbelief. "That's right. If my guess is correct, it should be Yi Guchen." Duan Tianfeng smiled proudly. To be honest, Duan Tianfeng was also shocked when he heard this news. In his expectations, Yi Guchen being able to become a 4-star blacksmith was already very good. That was because Yi Guchen's main focus was still on cultivation. It was already very difficult for him to not deteriorate on the path of blacksmithing. However, Duan Tianfeng still underestimated Yi Guchen's talent in blacksmithing. At such a young age, Yi Guchen had already become a 6-star blacksmith. It was conceivable that in the future, Yi Guchen would surpass his master and surpass him. So that's how it is. Yang Qi suppressed the shock in his heart and did not recover for a long time. However, when he thought about it carefully, there seemed to be no other possibility apart from Yi Guchen. Duan Tianfeng, you've taken in a good disciple. Yang Qi could not help but sigh. It could be said that their divine tool sect had gathered the majority of the blacksmithing geniuses in the South Horizon region. However, not a single one of them could reach the same height as Yi Guchen at such a young age. However, it's still too early to celebrate. The path of heavenly works can only give a rough evaluation of a blacksmith's skill. It does not represent everything, Yang Qi said after some thought. Duan Tianfeng nodded slightly. That was true. The path of heavenly works only tested a blacksmith's skill in 3 main areas. However, true blacksmithing was extremely complicated and involved many aspects. Although Yi Guchen's performance in the path of heavenly works was outstanding, no one knew how strong his actual blacksmithing ability was. Furthermore, that Nangong Jueyun passed the path of heavenly works a long time ago and obtained a 5-star blacksmith's token. His current blacksmithing ability can only be high, Yang Qi continued. You're right. However, I still believe in him. He won't disappoint me, Duan Tianfeng said confidently. I hope so. After all, I don't want Divine Tool Sect to become a puppet of the Nangong family and Shao Gongshu. Yang Qi sighed. He was still unsure of Yi Guchen's forging ability, but he had successfully passed the heavenly arts path and received the evaluation of a 6-star forging master. Logically speaking, no matter how low his actual standard was, it shouldn't be lower than 5-star. In this way, he would be on the same level as Song Feichen. If we include Yi Guchen, we have at least 2 5-star blacksmiths on our side. Hopefully, we can stop Nangong Jueyun, Yang Qi said. The next day, Yi Guchen and Little He left the inn. There were still 7 or 8 days until the young master selection of the artifact sect. Yi Guchen also prepared to take advantage of this gap to take a look at the trading area of Heavenly Craftsmanship City. As the largest blacksmith city in the South Horizon region, the Heavenly Craftsman City's trading area was also quite famous. There were all sorts of rare and precious materials, too many to count. Some of the rare flames that were hard to find in other places were also commonly traded in the trading zone. Not long after, Yi Guchen arrived at the trading area of the Heavenly Craftsman City. Inside the trading area, people were jostling one another, and it was extremely lively. On both sides of the street, there were all kinds of hawkers. Don't miss this. Rare materials are on sale. All for only 1,000 heaven crystals. Take a look. Take a look. A quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon forging hammer. It's a must-have for forging, traveling, and killing. Big brother, are you still worried about not being able to find a suitable heavenly and earthly flame? I have a mysterious heavenly and earthly flame map here. With it, you can easily find a heavenly and earthly flame. Yi Guchen smiled faintly as he looked at the bustling and smoke-filled trading area. Most of the items traded here were very unreliable. They were used to scam people to make money. However, with Yi Guchen's experience, he naturally wouldn't be deceived. He had also been paying attention to the rare flames, but after a few searches, he found that these rare flames were actually fake. Most of the so-called rare flames were disguised by demonic beast flames. Even if there were a few real rare flames, their power and quality were not as good as the extinguishing heart demon flame. Moreover, the price was not low. Naturally, Yi Guchen didn't care about them. Rare flames are very rare. The quality of the extinguishing heart demon flame is also considered to be above average. If you want to find a higher quality flame, you can't do it in 10 days or half a month. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. It seemed that it was impossible to find a higher quality and more powerful heavenly unique flame before the young sect master selection. Yi Guchen took a step back and began to look for some precious materials. As for the sacred material, although Yi Guchen also wanted to find it, it was obviously not that easy. Even if he was extremely lucky, he could find it. The value of the sacred material must be astronomical. Yiguchen couldn't get it at all. After searching for a while, Yiguchen also found some precious materials. At this time, an incomparably magnificent building in front attracted Yiguchen's attention. The building was resplendent and magnificent. The flow of people coming and going was very terrifying. There were also many onlookers. Yiguchen was curious. He went up to a young man and asked. The man cast a sidelong glance at Yiguchen and said, "Is this your first time in the heavenly craftsmanship city?" Yiguchen nodded. "This place is called the Thousand Treasures House. It's a stone-cutting place." The young man said, "Stone cutting?" Yiguchen was slightly puzzled. The young man said with a smile, "You laymen don't know. Many precious materials are sealed in some stones. Only when they are cut can they be determined. Before they are cut, everything is unknown. The Million Treasures Workshop is the largest gathering place of stone materials in the heavenly craftsmanship city. Someone once cut out a sacred material here, and someone once cut out a ball of natural fire. Don't you think it's awesome?" The young man clicked his tongue and sighed. "I see. There's such a business." Yiguchen suddenly understood. "However, as someone who has been through this before, I advise you to watch the show. After all, the price of each piece of stone is not cheap. The lowest price starts from 100,000 heaven crystals. However, in the end, it might be a pile of trash that is not even worth a single heaven crystal." The young man sighed. Yiguchen's eyes flickered. He finally understood. Stone cutting was also very dependent on luck. If one was not careful, they might lose everything. I used to have 1,000,000 heaven crystals with me. Until I met a stone cutting. Young man, listen to my advice. Just look at it. Don't touch it." The young man said earnestly, "Thank you." Yiguchen nodded slightly and then walked straight into the Thousand Treasures house. "Hey, you don't listen to my advice?" Seeing Yiguchen enter the Thousand Treasures house without hesitation, the young man shouted. He was just trying to persuade him, but the young man didn't listen at all. "Well, I'd like to see how many rounds you can afford to lose." The young man thought and followed in. Back then, he had bought 10 pieces of stone and lost all his money. With this young man's rash appearance, he should lose everything in half a day. Chapter 1333. The House of Myriad Treasures was bustling with activity. Platforms were scattered all over the place. Those who wanted to cut stones only needed to spend money to buy the materials. Afterwards, they would be sent to the platforms where specialized stone cutters would cut them open and determine their value. And around the high platform, there was a dense crowd of people who were watching the show. When some treasured materials were cut out, there would be many exclamations of surprise and admiration. However, most of the time, those who cut stones would lose everything. After all, if treasures could be cut out so easily, why would the House of Myriad Treasures give the stones to others to cut? "Young master, you look very unfamiliar. Is this your first time here?" As soon as Yiguchen stepped into the room, a beautiful, scantily clad maidservant with a hot body stepped forward and asked in a soft tone, "What's wrong with you?" "So big." "Oh no, I'm dizzy." The divine condor covered his eyes with his wings, but his wretched little eyes peeked through the gaps between his feathers. The maid did not mind. Instead, she smiled while covering her mouth. "Young master, your pet beast sure is interesting. Take me to see the stones," Yiguchen said indifferently. Hearing that, the maid's eyes lit up. "Young master, please come with Kai." Kai wore a charming smile, but she was overjoyed inside. Another big fish has taken the bait. He looks quite handsome and has quite the temperament. He should be the prodigy of some great clan or first-rate empire. Kai was delighted. Every time these maids sold a piece of stone, they would receive a commission. As a result, they liked these generous young masters the most. Although Yiguchen was dressed in a black robe and did not look extravagant, his outstanding temperament could not be concealed. Seeing Yiguchen follow Kai, the young man who came and shook his head, sighed, the first step into the abyss. A short while later, Yiguchen arrived at the area where the stones were placed. Kai eagerly introduced them to him. The stones have different prices according to their size and appearance. However, even the cheapest stone costs 100,000 heaven crystals. Kai explained as she secretly sized up Yiguchen. If he was someone who did not lack money, he would not have any expression when he heard the price of 100,000 heaven crystals. Sure enough, Yiguchen didn't care about the price at all. He just looked at the stones. Yiguchen had accumulated a large amount of celestial crystals. Also, the Sword Dynasty had rewarded him handsomely for his outstanding performance at the Holy Imperial World. He currently had over 50 million heaven crystals in his origin ring. This was a huge sum of money. Even the geniuses of the Overlord forces would only be able to gather this much. Therefore, Yiguchen did not lack money. These stones don't look too different from the outside. No wonder I have to try my luck. Yiguchen muttered to himself. Young master, do you want to try cutting a piece first? Kai cautiously probed. Yiguchen nodded lightly and said, Give me 10 pieces first. What, 10 pieces? Kai nodded instinctively. But in the next moment, her face was slightly dazed, and her beautiful eyes flashed with surprise. As expected, I've met Mr. Perfect. Kai was secretly excited. She did not know that the young man in front of her was the sword young master, Yiguchen, who had been the talk of the South Horizon region recently. After all, although there were many people who knew Yiguchen's name, there were only a few who had actually seen him. Very soon, Yiguchen selected 10 stones and brought them to the platform. An old master began to cut the stones. The young man was also greatly shocked by Yiguchen's wealth. However, he still shook his head. It's useless. Cutting stones is a bottomless abyss. Let alone 1,000,000 heaven crystals, even 5 million heaven crystals will be wasted. As expected, the 10 pieces of stone were quickly cut open. 7 of them were waste. As for the remaining 3 pieces, they were some superior metal treasures. They were not even supreme-grade treasures. The total value was only over 100,000 heaven crystals. Clearly, Yiguchen had suffered a huge loss this time. However, Yiguchen did not care. It was only 1,000,000 heaven crystals. It was just a small amount. Instead, the young man went up and patted Yiguchen's shoulder. Listen to me, brother. Let's stop. Seeing that, pushed the young man away. She stuck her sexy body close to Yiguchen. Young master, don't listen to him. Who knows, you might be able to cut out a divine material next. Kai's words were obviously to trick Yiguchen. As for obtaining a divine material, the chances were even lower than a natural flame falling from the sky. However, Yiguchen smiled faintly. You're right. Who knows, I might have that kind of luck. You're right, young master. Kai smiled sweetly, but she was secretly laughing inside. This handsome young master is quite easy to trick. Sigh, I'll just take it that I didn't listen to the advice of a good person. I'll suffer for it. The young man swung his sleeve and stopped trying to persuade Yiguchen. Afterwards, Yiguchen continued to choose stones. However, this time he stood motionless in front of the stones. Seeing that, seemed to have thought of something. She smiled. Young master, are you thinking of probing the stones with your soul force? That's right, Yiguchen said without any hesitation. Then I'll have to disappoint young master. These stones have been buried underground for countless years. The surface has undergone various special compressions. It's difficult for soul force to penetrate them. You can only find out after cutting them open, Kai explained. However, hearing that, Yiguchen's eyes revealed a strange look. That was because he discovered that his soul force was actually beginning to slowly penetrate the stones. Could it be because my sea of consciousness is different from ordinary people's? It's a chaotic sea of consciousness? Yiguchen was astonished. His soul force was also not ordinary soul force, but chaotic soul force. Yiguchen did not expect that his chaotic soul force could actually penetrate the stones. Now, the only thought in Yiguchen's mind was, he had to cut open all the precious stones. Seeing Yiguchen's astonished and motionless face, Kai thought that Yiguchen was disappointed. I want this one and this one. Yiguchen chose another 5 stones. After cutting them open, the flickering lights attracted the attention of many people. These 5 stones are actually not trash? That's right, 3 of them are treasured materials, and 2 of them are of the highest quality. This young master is really lucky. Those glistening treasured materials made the surrounding people exclaim in surprise. What the hell, could it be that this kid's luck has really changed? That young man opened his eyes wide, not daring to believe it. Young master is really lucky. Kai also stared blankly, before revealing a smile. To tell the truth, even she was startled. I'm just a bit lucky, that's all. Yiguchen smiled. He was only testing his skills. Now, it was time for him to show off his skills. Just as Yiguchen was preparing to look for even more precious stones. At the entrance of the Myriad Treasures house, cries of surprise suddenly rang out. 2 figures, 1 male and 1 female, slowly walked in. It's Miss Gu Xiangling of the Divine Artifact Sect, and the genius artificer Song Feichen. Shocked discussions rang out from the crowd. It's that pretty big sister. The divine condor on Yiguchen's shoulder said. Chapter 1334. Hearing the divine condor's words, Yiguchen's gaze also fell on the entrance of the Wanbao house. The man who entered was handsome and had a smile on his face. There was a blacksmith token hanging on his waist. There were 5 golden stars on it, indicating that the man was a 5-star blacksmith. He was none other than Nangong Ju Yun, the most talented forging genius of the current Divine Artifact Sect, Song Feichen. According to First Elder Yang Qi, he was the only person who had a glimmer of hope to stop Nangong Ju Yun. At this moment, he was chatting and laughing with the beautiful woman beside him. It was a young woman in an apricot-colored dress. Her features were picturesque, her skin was white as snow, her beautiful eyes were clear like a pool of jade water, and her figure was graceful like a willow tree. Although she was talking to Song Feichen, there was a trace of melancholy that couldn't be removed between her eyebrows. She was Gu Xiangling, the daughter of the sect leader of the Divine Artifact Sect. Xiangling, don't worry. I will definitely stop that Nangong Ju Yun from obtaining the position of young sect master. He's dreaming if he wants to marry you. Song Feichen comforted her with a confident smile. He had been cultivating in the Divine Artifact Sect since he was young, so he had known Gu Xiangling since they were young. Although they weren't particularly close, they could still be considered childhood sweethearts. Song Feichen naturally had feelings for Gu Xiangling in his heart. Thus, he simply would not allow Nangong Ju Yun to obtain the position of young sect master and marry Gu Xiangling. Thank you, senior brother Song. Gu Xiangling smiled. However, in her heart, she did not have much hope for Song Feichen. She had some understanding of Song Feichen's forging ability. As for Nangong Ju Yun's forging ability, she could not figure it out at all. Forget it, let's not talk about those unhappy things. Didn't you want to come to the 10,000 Treasures building to cut stones to relax? I'll pay the bill. Song Feichen patted his chest and said straightforwardly. Gu Xiangling didn't have many hobbies. Other than forging, the only thing he liked was cutting stones. Therefore, this time, Song Feichen took the initiative to invite Gu Xiangling to the 10,000 Treasures building to dispel Gu Xiangling's worries and to please her. Hi, pretty big sister, I didn't expect to meet you. At this moment, the sound of a rooster crowing was heard. Hearing this slightly familiar voice, Gu Xiangling looked over in surprise. He saw a young man in a black robe. His facial features were handsome beyond compare, and his eyebrows reached his temples. Although he did not reveal anything, his special temperament could not be concealed. In the crowd, he was like a crane among a flock of chickens. Little Black Monkey and Little Red Bird were standing on his shoulders, one on his left and one on his right. They were the 2 cute pets that had flirted with her the other day. It's you, Gu Xiangling smiled faintly and walked towards Yiguchen. It was all thanks to these 2 cute pets that Nangong Yuan was sent away that day, allowing her to relax and have some fun. You must be the almighty and omnipotent young master they were talking about, right? Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes sized up Yiguchen as she covered her mouth and laughed. She could vaguely sense Yi Guchen's cultivation, which was around the divine dwelling stage, which was already considered pretty good. However, that was all. Of course, Gu Xiangling didn't look down on them. This was within her expectations. "Ha, what nonsense are the two of you talking to this girl?" Yi Guchen smiled and shook his head. Yi Guchen asked himself. Although his strength was not bad, he was far from being almighty and omnipotent. "It's always been like this." The divine eagle chirped. "Ha, young master, your two cute pets are really interesting." Gu Xiangling laughed again, her smile like a blooming lotus. Seeing Gu Xiangling talking and laughing with Yi Guchen, the many onlookers around the Thousand Treasures house were stunned. That young master, where did he come from? How did he know Miss Gu? Interesting, is he a Taoran? Many people's gazes turned to Song Feichen, who was standing to the side with an unnatural expression. This was simply a scene from a world-famous painting. "Little sister, don't worry, my young master will definitely help you out of the sea of bitterness," the divine eagle vowed. "Brother Eagle, you can't say such things," Yi Guchen said helplessly. He had just met Gu Xiangling and didn't understand the situation at all. Although he knew that Gu Xiangling was the daughter of the leader of the divine artifact sect, Yi Guchen had no right to worry about her marriage. "Young master, don't worry, I'm just joking," Gu Xiangling said. She didn't take the divine eagle's words seriously at all. The young man in front of her was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament. However, it was obviously impossible for him to be involved in the selection of the young master. "Xiangling, this brother is..." Finally, Song Feichen couldn't hold back anymore. He stood up and deliberately asked Gu Xiangling in an intimate tone, as if he was declaring his sovereignty. "I've just met this young master, but his cute pets are quite interesting," Gu Xiangling said. "All right, Xiangling, let's go cut the stones. Don't waste time on random people." Song Feichen glanced at Yi Guchen and said lightly. A guy with an unknown background wanted to attract Gu Xiangling's attention with his cute pets. His method was a bit low. "Hey, you son of a bitch, how can you say that?" The divine eagle had always been sharp-tongued. He put his wings on his waist and shouted, "Humph, you're just a beast." Song Feichen's face twitched and he snorted. "That's right. I am a beast and so are you. You are a beast in human skin. Aren't you just lusting after the body of a beautiful lady?" The divine condor scolded in a harsh tone. Song Feichen's face turned red as anger surged in his heart. He admitted that he indeed lusted after Gu Xiangling's body, but how could he say it out loud? "Xiangling, let's go cut the stones." "Ignore this vulgar beast," Song Feichen said. Gu Xiangling's expression was calm. She wasn't stupid and naturally knew what Song Feichen was thinking about her. However, her feelings for Song Feichen were only that of a brother and sister of the same sect. Gu Xiangling smiled apologetically at Yi Guchen and then turned around to choose the stones. "What a pig, wanting to take advantage of the young lady," the divine eagle muttered. "That's enough." Yi Guchen shook his head and smiled. At this moment, Gu Xiangling also began to choose the stones. Cutting stones had always been Gu Xiangling's hobby. Moreover, she was also the daughter of the sect leader of the Divine Weapon sect, so she had a lot of experience in cutting stones. Even so, Gu Xiangling often missed 9 out of 10 stones. After all, this kind of stone cutting depended too much on luck. There were some methods to determine the value of a stone. However, these methods weren't very reliable. Gu Xiangling was carefully examining the stones while Song Feichen was also providing advice. Not long after, Gu Xiangling had finally chosen 5 stones. The prices ranged from 100,000 heaven crystals to 1,000,000 heaven crystals. This made Song Feichen's heart ache. However, in order to please the beauty, he was willing to spend a lot. Just as Gu Xiangling was about to ask the master to cut the stones, a calm voice sounded. "Miss Gu, do you really want to choose these 5 stones?" Chapter 1335. Hearing this, Gu Xiangling raised her eyebrows. Everyone else also looked over in surprise. The one who spoke was Yi Guchen. The reason why Yi Guchen spoke up was because his chaotic soul power had sensed that none of the 5 stones that Gu Xiangling had chosen had any treasures in them. Gu Xiangling gave off a good impression. Although she was the daughter of the sect master, she did not have the arrogance of other proud daughters of the heavens. Instead, she was more reserved and amiable. Adding Yi Guchen, she was destined to enter the competition for the position of junior sect master. Thus, he decided to increase Gu Xiangling's favorability in preparation for the future. After all, Yi Guchen did not believe that Divine Artifact sect would accept him so easily. After considering all sorts of things, Yi Guchen finally spoke. "Oh, what do you mean, sir?" Gu Xiangling asked. With her experience in cutting stones, even if there were no treasures in these 5 stones, she would at least not lose everything. Moreover, she had not chosen them alone. Song Feichen had also given her advice. "I just feel that you might have a better choice. For example, those stones over there." Yi Guchen casually pointed to another place, where there were a few ordinary stones piled up. Yi Guchen's chaotic soul force could sense that there were supreme quality treasures among them. Of course, Yi Guchen could also sense the fluctuations of rarer stones. However, Yi Guchen wanted to cut them himself, so he naturally could not point them out. Yi Guchen's words stunned everyone. Their expressions froze. Isn't that kid a little too full of himself? He's actually giving pointers to the young miss of Divine Artifact sect. Miss Gu and Song Feichen are both regular customers of the Myriad Treasures house. But he seems to be a stranger. It's my first time seeing him. Many discussions broke out. Even the maid Kai paled slightly. "Sir, perhaps you don't need to meddle in other people's business. Miss Gu and the others are experienced." Yi Guchen shook his head with an indifferent expression. He had only mentioned it casually. If Gu Xiangling was unwilling, then forget it. At this time, Song Feichen stood out with a gloomy expression. "Brother, I presume this is your first time in the Heavenly Craftsmanship City?" "That's right." Yi Guchen nodded honestly. "Since that's the case, this should also be your first time cutting a stone. However, do you know how many times Xiang Ling and I have cut stones? If you just want to use this to attract Xiang Ling's attention, then you don't have to use this little trick. Because no one knows how to cut rocks better than me," Song Feichen said proudly. His words attracted the praise of many people. It was indeed disgusting for an outsider to give advice to an insider. Facing Song Feichen's tit-for-tat, Yi Guchen didn't care. He wasn't the one who had lost anything. "Xiangling, ignore him. He's just trying to attract your attention. Let's cut the stone," Song Feichen said with a gentle smile. Gu Xiangling hesitated for a moment, but eventually nodded. She had no ill feelings towards Yi Guchen. However, she wouldn't rashly think that Yi Guchen's words were right. After all, Yi Guchen was indeed an outsider. "Master, let's cut the stone," Gu Xiangling said. An old master walked up to the high platform and began cutting the stone. After the first stone was cut, no light emitted. It was a complete waste. Gu Xiangling's face froze slightly. Song Feichen was also slightly embarrassed, but it was still considered natural. It was normal to cut out waste. "It's okay, Xiangling. We're unlucky this time. There are still 4 more chances. We'll definitely be able to cut out something good," Song Feichen comforted. However, after the second stone was cut, it was still a waste. With this, the surrounding people who sneered at Yi Guchen also quieted down. "It's okay, there are still 3 more. Song Feichen's mouth twitched slightly. The third stone was cut, but there was still nothing. The fourth stone was cut, but it was dim. The fifth stone was cut, but there were only some fine treasures. It was better than nothing. This time, Song Feichen's face was completely lost, and it was a little ugly. Of the 5 stones, 3 of them were chosen by him, but the result was a total loss. Gu Xiangling also frowned. She didn't expect her luck to be so bad. Her beautiful eyes suddenly flashed, and she turned to look at Yi Guchen. She asked, "Could it be that young master already guessed that these 5 stones were all waste?" Gu Xiangling's words made everyone's ears perk up. They looked at Yi Guchen in shock. If Yi Guchen really saw through it, then it was a little scary. Yi Guchen smiled faintly. "I also guessed it. He naturally couldn't reveal the matter of the chaotic soul power. If the Thousand Treasures house knew that he could see through the stones, would they still let him cut them? Gu Xiangling blinked her eyes. In her heart, she naturally didn't believe Yi Guqin's words. Does young master think that there might be treasures in these stones? Gu Xiangling pointed her finger at the stones that Yi Guqin had pointed out earlier. It's also a guess. Don't take it seriously. Yi Guqin shook his head casually. Gu Xiangling bit her lips and said, I want these 3 stones. Xiangling, how can you listen to him? What if they're all waste? Don't tell me you want him to pay for it? Song Feichen's expression changed. Senior brother Song doesn't need to pay for these 3 stones, Gu Xiangling said faintly. Seeing that Gu Xiangling trusted Yi Guqin so much, Song Feichen's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. I was just unlucky. It'd be strange if this hothead could pick good stones. Song Feichen looked down on her, his face full of disbelief. I'll have to trouble master to cut the stones, Gu Xiangling said. An old master went up and started cutting the stones. When the first stone was cut, a dense silver light spread out, accompanied by specks of starlight. It was quite mystical. What light is that? It's a supreme-grade treasure material, morning star iron. Gasps of surprise could be heard from the surroundings. Morning star iron was considered a rare treasure material. Within this stone, there was actually a fist-sized piece of morning star iron. In terms of value, it could be sold for 400,000 to 500,000 heaven crystals. It was already 4 to 5 times the cost of this stone. He's really lucky. Song Feichen snorted coldly. However, when the second stone was cut, an even denser emerald green light spread out. Could that be emerald heart essence? It's one of the best materials for forging heavenly tribulation divine weapons. Another rare treasure material was revealed before everyone's eyes. Gu Xiangling's jade face was filled with astonishment. If the first stone was said to be good luck, then the second stone was also said to be good luck. Was it also luck that there was a treasure in the second stone? You can't do the same thing more than 3 times. The last one, Gu Xiangling muttered to herself. When the old master cut the last stone, there seemed to be an electric glow spreading out. A piece of light blue metal appeared before everyone's eyes. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, their eyes filled with passion and shock. Could this be heavenly tribulation blue gold? Chapter 1336. They looked at the light blue metal that was faintly entwined with electric sparks. Everyone in the Myriad Treasures house widened their eyes, their eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. Heavenly tribulation blue gold was a rare and sacred material. Not only did it have lightning attributes, it was also extremely resistant to electricity. It could even withstand the might of tribulation lightning. It was rumored that if a 10th tribulation divine weapon was mixed with a bit of tribulation blue gold, it could withstand 100 lightning tribulations and become a 100 tribulation divine weapon. If there was a lot of it, it could withstand 1,000 or even 10,000 lightning tribulations and become a 10 tribulation divine weapon. It could be said that this was a divine material that almost all artificers dreamed of obtaining. Everyone was dumbfounded, their eyes red and their breathing heavy. If not for the fact that they were in the Myriad Treasures house and that the person cutting the rock was the eldest daughter of the divine artifact sect, they would have even thought of robbing it. It doesn't feel right. Tribulation blue gold is dark blue, but this metal is light blue? Suddenly, someone questioned. This time, many people calmed down and carefully examined the rock. That's right. This metal should be close to the blue gold of calamity, so it's tainted with the blue gold of calamity. It's not the real blue gold of calamity. An experienced forger shook his head and said regretfully. I see. No wonder. That's right. It'll be strange if it's real tribulation blue gold. Many people let out a deep breath. Song Feichen also wiped the sweat on his forehead. Even he would be shocked if he really found heavenly tribulation blue gold. But even if it's not real tribulation blue gold, it's contaminated with its aura. It's the best of the best. That's right. It's worth far more than ordinary supreme-grade materials, some people said enviously. Even Gu Xiangling herself was stunned for a long time before she came back to her senses. Then she stared at Yi Guchen with sparkling eyes. Cutting rocks was Gu Xiangling's only hobby. And now, she was certain that Yi Guchen had a secret appraisal method. Once or twice would have been fine, but to find treasures 3 times in a row, that was a little unusual. Not only Gu Xiangling, but the rest of the people also reacted and looked at Yi Guchen in surprise. Could it be that this youngster who looked like a layman was really pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? It seems that Xiangling's eyesight is poor. She actually failed to recognize an expert. Gu Xiangling chuckled. I'm not an expert. It's just luck. It's all luck. Yi Guchen waved his hand. Song Feichen's face alternated between green and white, appearing very awkward and ashamed. He had just said that no one knew how to cut stones better than him. This result was simply a slap to his face. I'm going to select some stones, Yi Guchen said to the maid Kai at his side. Oh, Kai was startled, coming back to her senses. She was also secretly sizing up Yi Guchen from the corner of her eye. If this was really luck, then it would be too unbelievable. Do you have anything more expensive here? Yi Guchen asked. These stones were worth hundreds of thousands of heavenly crystals, and among them there were at most some of the highest quality treasures. Yi Guchen was not satisfied with just that. We do, but the price. Kai said hesitantly. That price was indeed not something an ordinary person could accept. Lead the way, Yi Guchen said simply. Seeing Yi Guchen's attitude, Kai also nodded, secretly rejoicing in her heart. She brought Yi Guchen to the VIP area at the back of the Myriad Treasures house. Hearing that, Gu Xiangling's eyes flashed and she followed them. Song Feichen naturally followed closely behind. There was also that young man from the beginning as well as the other spectators, who all followed like a swarm of bees. They all wanted to know whether Yi Guchen really had some method, or whether it was just luck. In the VIP area of the Myriad Treasures house, there were clearly fewer stones. But every piece was extremely huge, even taller than a person. The tallest one was like a small hill. The stones here have all been carefully selected. They might contain rare items, but the price can't be the same as before. Normally, it starts at 5 million heavenly crystals, explained. Most of the stones outside started at 100,000. However, the stones here started at 5 million. The difference in price could be imagined. However, Yi Guchen's eyes secretly flickered with light. There were not many stones here, but the faint aura was indeed much more powerful than outside. His eyes flashed as he locked onto a piece of stone. How many heavenly crystals is this stone? Yi Guchen asked casually. This stone is worth 10 million heavenly crystals, Kai said carefully. 10 million heavenly crystals was not something that just anyone could take out casually. Even Song Feichen, the first senior brother of the divine artifact sect, would have to empty out his entire fortune if he wanted to take out 10 million heavenly crystals. 10 million heavenly crystals. How long has it been since the Myriad Treasures house has opened a stone worth 10 million heavenly crystals? Many spectators sighed emotionally. I'll take this one, Yi Guchen said casually. His tone and attitude were extremely calm. It was as if he had not taken out 10 million heavenly crystals, but a pile of stones. Young master, you'll need to show me the heavenly crystals as proof. His breathing became hurried. 10 million heavenly crystals was enough for her to take out a generous commission. Yi Guchen's origin ring flashed as he took out a crystal card. This crystal card was worth 10 million, so 10 million heavenly crystals were stored inside. Heavens, he can take out 10 million heavenly crystals just like that? Just where did this young man come from? Everyone sucked in a deep breath. Song Feichen's expression was extremely unnatural. Surprise and doubt flashed across his face. Gu Xiangling's heart shook slightly. She then remembered what the divine condor had said before. His young master was very powerful and could definitely help her. Could it be that he wasn't bragging? Gu Xiangling could not help but think. On the other side, a few stone-cutting masters had already started preparing to cut the stone. When this piece of stone was gradually cut open, Everyone could feel a frightening lightning energy that seemed to want to spread out. "Hurry up, activate the formation." An old master's expression changed. Generally speaking, this situation meant that the item cut out would definitely not be ordinary. On the ground, golden runes flowed, and a suppressive force of the formation spread out. Only then was the frightening power of lightning suppressed. The stone-cutting masters had a lingering fear, and only then did they completely cut open the stone. However, when the stone was cut open, a piece of dark blue metal the size of a human head was reflected in everyone's eyes. This piece of dark blue metal had lightning-like patterns on its surface, and there were threads of lightning spreading around it. If not for the suppression of the formation, the power of lightning would definitely have destroyed the entire Myriad Treasures house. After seeing this piece of dark blue metal, the entire place fell silent. Only heavy breathing could be heard. Their bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at the piece of blue metal. Heavenly Tribulation Blue Gold. The real Heavenly Tribulation Blue Gold. Chapter 1337. Everyone's eyes were red as they stared at the dark blue metal the size of a human head. The surface was engraved with lightning patterns, and there seemed to be electric sparks bursting out around it. Heavenly Tribulation Blue Gold. Without a doubt. Even those old blacksmiths could be sure after careful observation. This was definitely a genuine divine material, Heavenly Tribulation Blue Gold, and not the similar metal that Gu Xiangling had cut out. Oh my God, how long has it been since the Myriad Treasures house cut out a divine material? Yeah, the last time was a few years ago. I didn't expect this young man to cut out a divine material. What the hell? The entire Myriad Treasures house was in an uproar. Countless gasps could be heard in all directions. No one had cut out a divine material in the Myriad Treasures house for many years. They didn't expect it to be cut out by a young man. The maid on the side was dumbfounded and in a daze. If it was a waste, the Myriad Treasures house would have made a profit, and her commission would be higher. But now, Yiguchen had cut out a divine material, which was a huge loss for the Myriad Treasures house. Not to mention getting a commission, it would be good enough if she didn't get punished. The young man who introduced the Myriad Treasures house to Yiguchen at the beginning was also petrified, standing in a daze on the spot. He thought that Yiguchen had stepped into the abyss and would soon lose everything. But now, just this piece of Heavenly Tribulation Blue Gold was estimated to be worth tens of millions of heaven crystals, and it was priceless. At this moment, the young man was extremely regretful. If he had known, he would have hugged Yiguchen in advance. As for Gu Xiangling, her beautiful eyes were shining like never before. If she hadn't guessed that Yiguchen had a special method by now, she would be a fool. As for Song Feichen, he was completely frozen on the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. His head was buzzing, and he felt as if a hammer was continuously smashing his head. What the hell? Song Feichen clenched his fists, his face alternating between green and purple. He admitted that he was jealous. That was a divine material, a priceless treasure for blacksmiths. The commotion here had obviously alarmed the higher-ups of the Myriad Treasures house. A moment later, a soft and seductive female voice sounded. "Oh, I didn't expect another stone-cutting expert to come to our Wanbao house. I wonder if you can pass on your experience to him?" Along with this voice, a woman with an enchanting figure in a red dress walked out from the depths of the 10,000 Treasures Tower. Seeing the woman in the red dress, some of the male warriors present could not help but swallow their saliva. The woman in the red dress had a charming and pretty face. Her skin was snow-white, and her domineering figure made people unable to take their eyes off her. Her towering peaks trembled as she walked up and down, and everyone's gazes followed her up and down. "Oh my God, 2 papayas?" The divine condor covered its sharp beak with its small wings and exclaimed in surprise. "Sister Xian." The maid Kai hurriedly bowed. The voluptuous woman in the red dress was the person in charge of the 10,000 Treasures house, Lu Xian. At this moment, Lu Xian's watery eyes were staring at Yiguchen. There was a charming smile on her face, but there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. People like Yi Guchen were not welcome in the 10,000 Treasures house. What the 10,000 Treasures house needed was a rich person who could cut out waste constantly, not a veteran like Yi Guchen who could cut out treasures easily. This is my first time coming to the 10,000 Treasures house. I don't have much experience. It's just pure luck, Yi Guchen said indifferently. He would never reveal the fact that he had chaotic soul energy. Oh, is that so? But I don't believe you. Lu Xian took a step and landed in front of Yi Guchen. A slightly powdered face approached Yi Guchen, and a strong fragrance wafted over. The surrounding men looked at her with envy. Lu Xian of the 10,000 Treasures house was a well-known beauty in the heavenly craftsman city. She was mature and charming, making people drool. Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows slightly, but there was no change in his expression. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing you can do, Yi Guchen said indifferently. Lu Xian was surprised to see that Yi Guchen's expression did not change at all. Wasn't a mature beauty like her more attractive to some young men? She did not know that Yi Guchen's heart was that of a sword demon who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. A mere Lu Xian was not even worthy of his attention. If that's the case, then the 10,000 Treasures house is willing to pay 30 million heaven crystals to buy this heaven tribulation blue gold. Do you agree? Lu Xian asked, taking a step back. To be honest, 30 million heaven crystals was not a low price. However, sacred materials were hard to come by, not to mention a metal like the heaven tribulation blue gold that could withstand the heaven tribulation. I'm sorry. Yi Guchen refused. You're rejecting me so directly? It's so sad. Lu Xian shook her head slightly, looking sad. Her seductive look made the surrounding group of male martial artists gulp. Yi Guchen shook his head. He did not care at all. This made Gu Xiangling, who was not far away, think more highly of him. If Yi Guchen was the kind of person who could be easily tempted, she would inevitably look down on him. Just as Yi Guchen was about to continue choosing stones. Suddenly, an angry shout was heard. You two bastards are here too? Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man in luxurious clothes walk in. When he saw the divine eagle and Blackie on Yi Guchen's shoulder, his eyes were immediately filled with anger. This man was Nangong Yuan, the disciple of the Nangong family who was beaten up by the divine eagle and Blackie. This time, Nangong Yuan came to the 10,000 Treasures house to buy some precious materials under the order of Nangong Jueyun. In addition to cutting stones, the 10,000 Treasures house also provided precious materials for trading. Nangong Yuan did not expect to meet two bastards who made him gnash his teeth in anger here. Damn it, I'm so unlucky to meet a lackey like you here. The divine eagle spat. You bastard, you're courting death. Nangong Yuan flew into a rage and rushed toward Yi Guchen. A cold light flashed in Yi Guchen's eyes. At this time, Lu Xian stopped him. Young Master Nangong, this is the 10,000 Treasures house. Please fight outside. Nangong Yuan couldn't help but stop. He glared at the divine condor fiercely, then turned to Yi Guchen and said coldly, You are the master of these two beasts? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows and said coldly, Watch your words. A faint pressure pressed down on Nangong Yuan, forcing him to take a few steps back. Nangong Yuan was shocked and doubtful. Just now, he felt an extremely terrifying pressure, as if his heart was about to be crushed. Nangong Yuan calmed down and said coldly, Since you're the master of these two demonic beasts, you should be responsible for them hurting me. Tell me, how do you want to compensate me? Nangong Yuan crossed his arms in front of his chest and stared coldly at Yi Guchen. Compensation? Yi Guchen tilted his head and asked. That's right. By the way, I'm a disciple of the Nangong family. Think about it carefully. Nangong Yuan said arrogantly. Who do you think you are? So what if you're from the Nangong family? Yi Guchen stood with his hands behind his back and looked at him coldly. For a moment, the atmosphere in the 10,000 Treasures house seemed to have frozen. Chapter 1338. Everyone's eyes widened, their expressions filled with astonishment and bewilderment. Could it be that this young man didn't know about the Nangong family? Even if he didn't know about the Nangong family, since he came to Heavenly Craftsmanship City, he would definitely have heard of Nangong Ju Yun's great name. Gu Xiangling's expression changed slightly, and she said to Yiguchen, "This young master, he's a disciple of the Nangong family, Nangong Ju Yun's man." Gu Xiangling reminded him because she didn't want Yiguchen to inadvertently provoke Nangong Ju Yun. Although Gu Xiangling had already concluded that Yiguchen's background was probably somewhat extraordinary, she still didn't think that he could offend Nangong Ju Yun. "Of course I know Nangong Ju Yun, but so what?" Yiguchen said indifferently. When Song Feichen heard that, he chuckled coldly and said, "You're really ignorant enough. Do you really think that Nangong Ju Yun is someone that anyone can provoke? What does it have to do with you?" Yiguchen didn't even look at Song Feichen. "Humph, when the time comes, if you really provoke Nangong Ju Yun, you'll be crying," Song Feichen said coldly. On the other side, Nangong Yuan also didn't expect that Yiguchen actually didn't fear him at all. It was useless even if he pulled out the Nangong family. This made Nangong Yuan unable to swallow his anger. But speaking of teaching him a lesson, Yiguchen's aura did indeed make Nangong Yuan's heart beat a little faster. His eyes turned, and a scheme suddenly flashed in his mind. If this plan succeeds, not only can I vent my anger, but I can also obtain generous rewards. Nangong Yuan smiled in his heart. He said indifferently, "You're arrogant enough. But you should be here to cut stones in this Thousand Treasures house, right?" "So what if I am?" Yiguchen said. "You can't use force in the Thousand Treasures house, but do you dare to compete with me in cutting stones?" Nangong Yuan had a hint of arrogance on his face. He had cut many stones in the Thousand Treasures house and also cut out supreme-grade treasures. He thought that his eyesight was pretty good. As for the young man in front of him, he looked like a hothead. He probably hadn't been to the Wanbao house more than a few times. However, after he said those words, everyone present looked at him with strange gazes. The heavenly tribulation blue gold that Yiguchen had cut out had already been brought in by the master to be processed, so Nangong Yuan didn't see it. "Oh, are you sure?" Yiguchen's expression did not change. "Of course. But are you scared?" Nangong Yuan smiled proudly. "All right then, how do you want to bet?" Yiguchen asked. Nangong Yuan rolled his eyes and said, "How about this? If we want to bet, let's bet big. We'll each buy 3 pieces of stone and cut them open. The final cut will be the total value. The one with the highest price wins. The winner will not only have to give all the treasures they obtain to the winner, but they will also have to compensate the winner with 30 million heaven crystals." This huge gamble caused many people to suck in a breath of air. The treasured material that was cut out and the bet of 30 million was indeed a huge gamble. However, many people knew that Yiguchen had casually taken out 10 million heaven crystals without even blinking. "But do you dare to bet? Or are you saying that you can't take out so many heaven crystals?" Nangong Yuan sneered. However, when he said that, the group of people around him looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. The divine condor even covered his mouth and snickered. "This guy is really stupid. Okay, then I'll bet with you." Yiguchen nodded slightly. Nangong Yuan had taken the initiative to come to him. If he didn't bet, it would be too disrespectful. "I'll go first." Yiguchen turned his eyes and glanced at the precious stones. Just now, he had already used his chaotic soul power to sense the fluctuations of those stones. Now, he was 90% sure. This one, and this one." Yiguchen pointed out 3 stones. You chose this kind of stone?" Nangong Yuan stammered. He couldn't believe it. He thought that Yiguchen would choose stones that were worth a few million heaven crystals at most. He didn't expect that Yiguchen would choose such precious stones. "You have this?" Nangong Yuan was about to ask Yiguchen if he had the money. Yiguchen waved his hand and took out 3 crystal cards. This represented 30 million heaven crystals. Hiss! Although Yiguchen's generosity had already shocked many people. Now, seeing Yiguchen casually throw out 30 million heaven crystals, they still couldn't hide the shock in their hearts. Where did this person come from? "You." Nangong Yuan's face turned slightly red. "You can choose now," Yiguchen said. Nangong Yuan's face was as red as a monkey's butt. As a disciple of the Nangong family, he was indeed rich. However, his entire fortune was only 10 million heaven crystals. At this moment, seeing the various gazes around him, Nangong Yuan's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'll choose here too." In addition to Nangong Yuan's 10 million heaven crystals, Nangong Ju Yun also gave him 20 million heaven crystals to buy various rare materials. In any case, with my foresight, I'll definitely be able to beat him. When the time comes, I'll be able to earn back my capital and interest, Nangong Yuan thought to himself. He understood that if he didn't give up the child, he wouldn't be able to catch the wolf. With his own fortune and the 20 million heaven crystals given by Nangong Ju Yun, Nangong Yuan managed to gather 30 million heaven crystals to buy 3 expensive stones. This kind of spending caused the atmosphere of the entire Thousand Treasures house to boil. Lu Xian also had a smile on her face. She couldn't wait to gamble like this a few more times. "You go first," Yiguchen said calmly. "Fine, I'll go first," Nangong Yuan said coldly and called over the master who was cutting the stones. The formation on the ground had already been activated to prevent any rare materials from being cut. The fluctuations were too strong. Under the gazes of everyone present, Nangong Yuan began to cut the stones. The first stone was cut open. It was an extremely rare black ore. Obsidian jade? Seeing this ore, some blacksmiths whispered softly. This was a very rare treasure. Although it wasn't at the level of a sacred material, it was usually in short supply. Most importantly, there was a large amount of obsidian jade in the stone. "It's barely enough," Nangong Yuan snorted. Then, the second stone was also cut open. Its value was about the same as the first. After the third stone was cut open, it was a piece of scrap. This made Nangong Yuan's expression turn a little ugly. However, even if it was a precious stone, there was a high chance that he would lose everything. Therefore, Nangong Yuan could barely accept it. What he cared about the most was Yi Guchen's result. "Master, cut it open," Yi Guchen said with a faint smile. His expression was very calm. The masters nodded and began to cut the stones. What kind of good stone can a hothead like him choose? Nangong Yuan's mouth had a hint of disdain. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, an extremely dazzling light burst out from the cut stone. This aura, could it be? Chapter 1339. A dazzling brilliance radiated from the stone. Everyone in the Thousand Treasures house had their eyes glued to the stone like magnets meeting iron. When the brilliance dissipated, a piece of silver-white metal appeared, surrounded by the void will. This is Void Mother Gold. Another divine material? Everyone's eyes almost fell out of their sockets, and they almost stopped breathing. On the same day, 2 divine materials were cut out in succession. This was something that had never happened before. Gu Xiangling's face was also filled with shock. Song Feichen was also dumbfounded. His eyes were wide open, and his mind was buzzing. As for Lu Xian, the person in charge of the Myriad Treasures house, her chest heaved up and down. She took a deep breath, unable to believe what she was seeing. Of course, everyone's shock was not even 1,000th of Nangong Yuan's. Am I hallucinating? Nangong Yuan could not believe it, and he pinched his arm hard. The piercing pain told him that the scene in front of him was not an illusion. How is this possible? A divine material? How can you be so lucky? Nangong Yuan shouted in disbelief, as if millions of thunderbolts were roaring in his mind. Was there even a need to compete? There was no need to cut out the remaining 2 stones. Yi Guchen had already won the bet with this Void Mother Gold. Are you trying to extort me? Nangong Yuan's face turned purple. He glanced at Yi Guchen and then at Lu Xian. Lu Xian recovered from her shock. When she heard Nangong Yuan's words, she frowned slightly and said, "Young Master Nangong, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Are you slandering the reputation of the Myriad Treasures house?" "No, I'm just a little surprised," Nangong Yuan said embarrassedly. He knew that the owner of the Myriad Treasures house was no ordinary person. It was the Beiyan Device Emperor, Shao Gongshu. If he offended Xiao Gongshu, even if he was Nangong Ju Yun's lackey, he would not be able to bear the consequences. This young master has already cut out a divine material. This is already the second one, Lu Xian said. What? Hearing this, Nangong Yuan was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Now, no matter how stupid Nangong Yuan was, he understood that Yi Guchen must have a special appraisal method. Continue cutting. Yi Guchen's expression was calm. Being able to cut out 2 divine materials in a row, he was also a little happy. Now, the possibility of forging a divine weapon of his own was even greater. A moment later, the second piece of stone was also cut open. It was a rare treasure. Although it did not reach the level of a divine material, it was not far off. Fortunately, if another piece of divine material was cut out, then this young master is simply a stone-cutting grandmaster. Some people wiped their sweat and said. At this moment, Nangong Yuan's face was completely pale. His face was so black that it was as if he had smeared the ashes of a pot on it. He had already lost this gamble. The rest was nothing more than routine work. Finally, the stone-cutting masters began to cut the third stone. This piece of stone was larger than the previous 2 pieces, and its surface was slightly black. It didn't look too good. Therefore, this piece of stone had been sitting there collecting dust, and no one was willing to buy it to cut it. Many people were also puzzled. They did not understand why Yi Guchen would choose such a bad-looking stone. However, Yi Guchen had a faint smile on his face. He said, "Before cutting it open, please increase the suppression of the array to the maximum." Yi Guchen's words made many people puzzled. What is he trying to do? Song Feichen thought to himself. Lu Xian's beautiful eyes flashed. She was even more certain that Yi Guchen had an appraisal method that no one else knew. Young master, you said that you were just lucky. Doesn't this prove that you have a special method? Lu Xian pretended to be disappointed. Her voice was numb to the bone. Yi Guchen smiled faintly and did not say anything. He did not care if it was leaked, because he glanced around and found that there were almost no more stones that interested him. Although many people were puzzled about the meaning of Yi Guchen's words, Lu Xian still ordered people to increase the suppression of the array. After a short while, several stone-cutting masters began to carefully cut the stone. When a slit appeared in the stone, a wisp of white flame seemed to rush out of it all of a sudden. At the same time, the temperature of the entire Million Treasures house began to rise rapidly. This is... Everyone's eyes widened and they were almost suffocating. They had a premonition in their hearts. Boom! The stone-cutting masters finally cut the stone. The moment the stone was cut open, a surging white flame spread out. The suppression of the array quickly spread out and suppressed the white flame. Even so, the entire array was trembling violently and could only barely suppress the white flame. This is a rare flame of heaven and earth. The crowd cried out in surprise. The group of people was so shocked that their scalps went numb and they were dumbfounded. Not only did they find a sacred material, they even found a rare flame of heaven and earth. There were indeed some rare flames of heaven and earth that were buried underground and eventually sealed in ancient stones. However, this probability was too rare. It was even rarer than finding a sacred material. Gu Xiangling, Song Feichen, and the others were shocked. As artificers, they naturally had their own rare flames of heaven and earth. Even so, when they saw the white flames, their hearts were still filled with shock. Because the rare flames of heaven and earth in their bodies were faintly suppressed by the white flame. As for Nangong Yuan, he seemed to be in a daze. It was as if his soul was about to leave his body. He had completely lost this gamble. Not only did he lose all the heaven crystals that Nangong Jueyun gave him, but he also had to pay 30 million heaven crystals. At this moment, Nangong Yuan even had the heart to die. It was as if he had shot himself in the foot. As for Lu Xian, her charming face was also unnatural and pale. It would be fine if Yi Guchen had only cut out a piece of tribulation blue gold. Then he had obtained a piece of void origin gold. Now he had even found a rare flame of heaven and earth. This was a huge loss for the Million Treasures house. As for Lu Xian, it was a loss so great that she didn't even have her underwear. Most importantly, the white flame was clearly not an ordinary rare flame of heaven and earth. The blazing temperature seemed to be able to burn the void, causing Lu Xian's scalp to go numb. This flame, could it be the legendary Daluo void incineration flame? Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were very bright. She stared at the white flame with curiosity and surprise. The Daluo void incineration flame was one of the highest-ranked rare flames of heaven and earth. The characteristic of this flame was that it was bleak white, as if it could merge with space. If the flame's strength was used to the extreme, it was rumored that it could even burn the void. Whether it was the power of the flame or used to refine pills, it was definitely a top-notch flame. Chapter 1340. The Origin Void Incineration Flame. It really is the Origin Void Incineration Flame. Heavens, I can't believe I'm able to see such a precious flame in my lifetime. Some old blacksmiths' eyes trembled, unable to contain their excitement. For some blacksmiths and alchemists, natural flames were like their best friends and companions. To use an analogy, the Origin Void Incineration Flame was equivalent to a national treasure among natural flames. It could only be encountered by chance. Even with Yi Guqin's calm temperament, he couldn't help but take a deep breath at this moment. In truth, Yi Guqin only felt that this stone was extraordinary. It contained a blazing heat that made him rather wary. Yi Guqin had also guessed that it might be a natural flame, but he didn't expect it to be of such a high grade. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Yi Guqin. He had been thinking that the Nirvana demonic flame alone might not be enough, but now he had obtained the Origin Void Incineration Flame. This was simply a pillow delivered when he was about to doze off. "Please seal the great overarching Void Incineration Flame," Yi Guqin said. The old blacksmiths hurriedly searched for containers to seal the flame seed. In the end, several containers were brought over, but they were all directly melted by the Origin Void Incineration Flame. In the end, they took out a container branded with a sealing array to barely seal the Origin Void Incineration Flame seed. Yi Guqin took the container and could feel the terrifying heat coming from it. He could also feel countless envious gazes fall on him. A natural flame, 2 sacred materials, and various other supreme-grade treasures. Not to mention others, even Yi Guqin himself wanted to rob him. However, he still looked to Nangong Yuan with a playful smile on his face. Seeing Yi Guqin's expression, Nangong Yuan looked like he had eaten shit. "I don't think a dignified disciple of the Nangong family like you would do something like reneging on a bet, right?" Yi Guqin said leisurely. Hearing Yi Guqin's words, Nangong Yuan wanted to take a brick and smash his previous self to death. It was as if he had dug a hole for himself and jumped into it. Moreover, it was a thorough hole. Nangong Yuan's expression kept changing. If he really fulfilled the bet, then Nangong Yuan would be finished. It was one thing for him to lose all his assets, but most importantly, he had also lost the 20 million heaven crystals that Nangong Zhuyun had given him. Even though Nangong Zhuyun usually treated people warmly and did not seem to have any airs, he was actually quite strong. But when he was truly angry, he was like a lion whose tail had been stepped on. Therefore, Nangong Yuan definitely didn't want to make Nangong Zhuyun unhappy. However, Nangong Yuan wasn't that thick-skinned in front of everyone. But suddenly, Nangong Yuan thought of something. Would the House of Thousands treasures allow Yi Guqin to take away the heaven and earth rare flames and divine materials? It was as if Nangong Yuan was thinking the same thing. Lu Xian's beautiful eyes flashed. She stepped forward with a smile and said, "Young master, we can temporarily put aside the bet. The House of Thousands treasures is willing to buy the Origin Void Incineration Flame for 50 million heaven crystals." Lu Xian's words caused everyone to suck in a sharp breath. 50 million heaven crystals. This was a huge sum of money that ordinary cultivators couldn't imagine. One must know that when Lu Xian said that she wanted to buy the divine materials, she had only offered 30 million heaven crystals. It was obvious that the Origin Void Incineration Flame's value was above the divine materials. Lu Xian's eyes were blazing with anticipation. If she could buy the Origin Void Incineration Flame and give it to her master, Shao Gongxing, she would definitely receive a generous reward. After all, no artificer could resist the temptation of a supreme-grade heaven and earth rare flame. 50 million. Even Gu Xiangling and Song Feichen, who didn't lack money, couldn't help but sigh. Gu Xiangling was very curious whether Yi Guchen would sell the Origin Void Incineration Flame or not. After all, he didn't look like an artificer. Moreover, it would be very difficult for someone of the Divine Dwelling stage to refine the Origin Void Incineration Flame, and he might even suffer a backlash. However, this suggestion seemed a little laughable to Yi Guchen. He needed a supreme-grade heaven and earth rare flame, so how could he sell it? I'm sorry, but I won't sell the Origin Void Incineration Flame or Divine Materials, replied Yi Guchen. This. Lu Xian was stunned. The price she had offered was already very generous, but she hadn't expected Yi Guchen to refuse. Thinking of this, Lu Xian frowned. Young master, Lu Xian knows that you want to refine this flame, but with your Divine Dwelling stage cultivation, the chances of refining this flame are not only zero, but you might even suffer a backlash and be in danger of losing your life. Lu Xian's words were half a lie and half the truth. This was because refining a supreme-grade heaven and earth rare flame was indeed very dangerous. Ha! Yi Guchen chuckled unconcernedly. How many trump cards did he have? Not only did he have a strong constitution, but he also had the heart of an ancient god, as well as various top-grade divine medicines. Although refining the Origin Void Incineration Flame was somewhat painful, it was far from being able to threaten Yi Guchen's life. Thank you for your concern, but I naturally have my own plans, said Yi Guchen. Lu Xian's frown deepened. In truth, if she really allowed Yi Guchen to take away the Origin Void Incineration Flame and the two divine materials, she would definitely be reprimanded by Master Xiao. Thinking of this, Lu Xian secretly signaled with her eyes, and several guards of the Thousand Treasures House blocked the exit. 2 stewards of the Thousand Treasures House also appeared, faintly exuding the aura of heavenly palace sovereigns. Sensing this change, Yi Guchen's eyes dimmed, but he remained calm and said with a faint smile, "Is the Thousand Treasures House going to forcibly keep someone here?" Yi Guchen's words made many people's expressions change. The Thousand Treasures House was known for its reputation. If they really forced Yi Guchen to stay for the rare flame and the divine materials, their reputation would be ruined. Of course not, I just want you to stay as a guest and teach me your stone-cutting experience. I happen to have time tonight, and I want to have a good spar with you. Lu Xian's posture was charming, and her jade-like arms were wrapped around her chest, holding up her plump bosom. Her words were gentle and seductive, and ordinary male martial artists would feel their lower abdomens burning. Yi Guchen tilted his head slightly and looked at Lu Xian. Was she going to use both the hard and soft approach? On one hand, she was seducing him. On the other hand, she had the venerable stewards block the exit. If it were anyone else, they might really have compromised. But who was Yi Guchen? Just as everyone thought that Yi Guchen would have some trouble escaping today, Gu Xiangxiang suddenly spoke up. However, Gu Xiangling suddenly spoke up. I feel that this young master has the freedom to make his choice. As soon as she said this, Lu Xian and the others' expressions changed slightly. She did not expect that the daughter of the divine artifact sex leader would speak up for this young man. Beautiful lady, you are indeed beautiful, and your heart is beautiful too. The divine eagle flapped its wings and praised. I'm just stating the facts. Gu Xiangling said calmly. This made Song Feichen, who was watching from the side, feel sour in his heart. Seeing this, Yi Guchen smiled faintly at Gu Xiangling. Thank you for your help, Miss Gu, but Yi Guchen paused. Then, his expression suddenly turned cold as he said indifferently, as long as I don't want to, who dares to force me to stay? Chapter 1341. Yi Guchen's words were cold and calm, but there seemed to be a boundless domineering aura in them. As long as he was unwilling, no one dared to force him to stay. Hearing this, many people were secretly speechless. The Thousand Treasures House was not a small figure. Behind it stood the Beiyan Weapon Emperor, Master Xiao. It was because of this that no one dared to be presumptuous in the Thousand Treasures House. And now, The young man had said such words in front of the person in charge of the Thousand Treasures house. It was undoubtedly a direct slap in the face. When Lu Xian heard this, the originally bewitching smile on her face turned slightly cold. Her appearance just now was naturally an act. She wanted to find a way to obtain the Daluo Void Incineration Flame and the two sacred materials. Moreover, given the Thousand Treasures house's reputation, it was naturally impossible to snatch it away in front of everyone. Therefore, she could only use both soft and hard methods to make Yi Guchen admit defeat. But Lu Xian did not expect the young man to be so stubborn. Nangong Yuan was overjoyed when he saw this. He now hoped that Yi Guchen would jump into the fire pit. This way, the bet would be voided. Thinking of this, Nangong Yuan added oil to the fire and said to Lu Xian, "This kid doesn't know what's good for him and openly despises the Thousand Treasures house. I suggest that the Thousand Treasures house imprison him and teach him a lesson first." Nangong Yuan's words were undoubtedly adding fuel to the fire. Lu Xian was also happy to see this. She pretended to be helpless and shook her head. The Thousand Treasures house doesn't want to use force to oppress others, but this young master really doesn't give us any face, so. Lu Xian paused and gave a look. The two supremacy deacons were about to step forward and capture Yi Guchen. Who dares? Yi Guchen stomped his foot on the ground. His cultivation was at the 6th layer of the Divine Dwelling realm, plus the support of the leakless Divine Dwelling. Berserk Chi surged out. At the same time, there was also an extremely terrifying sword intent that spread out, making everyone shiver in fear, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Of course, the two protectors were the most shocked. They had just entered the Heavenly Palace's venerable stage, and the Divine Dwelling stage kid in front of them made a chill rise in their hearts. A Divine Dwelling expert made the two sovereigns feel a chill in their hearts. This was simply illogical. What a terrifying sword intent. This young master. Some people were terrified, but at the same time, they also felt that something was wrong. This terrifying sword intent was definitely not something that an ordinary prodigy could possess. Only the most elite prodigies had that kind of aura that could intimidate everyone. Such a terrifying sword intent, and that little red bird on his shoulder, it can't be. Although a small number of people present had never met Yi Guchen, they had heard some news about Yi Guchen. For example, his cultivation was at the 6th layer of the Divine Dwelling stage, but his strength far exceeded this level. For example, he had 4 peerless sword daos, and his sword will was so dense that it was terrifying. For example, he would occasionally be accompanied by a little red bird and a black monkey. If one or two of them were coincidences, then when all of them were connected, everyone had a terrifying guess in their hearts. That's right, the young man just called himself Yi Guchen. Could he be? An old blacksmith was horrified. Yi Guchen, he is the peerless heaven pride that swept across the sacred emperor realm, Yi Guchen. Some cultivators suddenly came back to their senses and exclaimed, "What? He is the Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty, the famous Yi Guchen?" For a time, the entire Thousand Treasures house was in an uproar. Everyone's eyes fell on Yi Guchen in unison. After all, Yi Guchen's name had been too famous recently. Even if they had never seen Yi Guchen, they had heard his name many times. After all, Yi Guchen's experience was legendary. He rose from a low-level dynasty and could be used as a model storyteller. What? He is Yi Guchen? Gu Xiangling's eyelashes trembled. She seemed to have turned into a jade statue. Previously, she had vaguely guessed that Yi Guchen's background might be extraordinary. But they never thought that he was the Yi Guchen who had been the talk of the town. At the side, Song Feichen was also in a daze. His body trembled and his breathing quickened. He's Yi Guchen? Song Feichen was trembling all over. He had heard of Yi Guchen's deeds. In the sacred emperor realm, he was a master who killed without batting an eye. He killed Gu Xiaoyang of an overlord-level force without hesitation. None of the 4-star lords were spared. To be honest, such a person could kill Song Feichen with just a wave of his sword. Just now, I actually said that Yi Guchen was an outsider and provoked him? At this moment, Song Feichen felt a lingering fear, as if cold water was flowing down his spine. As for Nangong Yuan, he was completely dumbfounded. His entire body was petrified, as if he had turned into a statue. He had thought of everything, but he had never expected Yi Guqin's true identity. To think that he had used the Nangong family's identity to suppress him. This was a ruthless person who could casually kill an overlord-level prodigy. Why would he be afraid of a lackey of the Nangong family? Damn it! Nangong Yuan wanted to cry but had no tears. What kind of sin did he commit to provoke such a character? Even Nangong Juyun did not want to provoke Yi Guqin, let alone a lackey like him. Although he was not afraid of him, he did not want to provoke him. On the other hand, Lu Xian's charming face was extremely stiff. Even her delicate body was a little stiff. She had guessed that Yi Guqin might have some background, but she had not expected his identity. What? You still want to force me to stay? Yi Guqin stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently. After Yi Guqin's identity was exposed, everyone looked at him in a different light. One had to know that Yi Guqin was not alone now. Behind him stood the entire Sword Dynasty, and there were Saint King powerhouses. Not to mention, there was also Ming Kuan, who was comparable to a Saint King powerhouse. The North Nether King was also considered to be on his side. With such a background, even the Thousand Treasures house would not dare to provoke Yi Guqin easily. Provoking Yi Guqin was undoubtedly provoking the entire Sword Dynasty. I also did not expect that you are the famous Jiankue, Yi Guqin. Lu Xian's charming face was extremely awkward. She bowed respectfully to Yi Guqin, feeling extremely nervous. This time, they had really provoked a thorn. Then, does your Thousand Treasures house still want me to stay? Yi Guqin said coldly. Of course, you can stay as you wish. How would we dare to force you to stay? Lu Xian said with a forced smile. If Yi Guqin was really allowed to stay, the saints and even the Saint Kings of the 10,000 Treasures house would come to cause trouble tomorrow. Yi Guqin's gaze turned to Nangong Yuan. Nangong Yuan's legs trembled, and he fell to the ground with a plop. Will you fulfill this bet? Yi Guqin asked casually. However, that faint pressure made Nangong Yuan's mind about to collapse. He hurriedly nodded and said, of course, but I really don't have any sky crystals on me. It's fine. Yi Guqin waved his hand and handed over a piece of paper. You don't have any sky crystals. Write an IOU and let your master pay it back. Hearing these words, the pupils of everyone present abruptly shrunk. Nangong Yuan's master was Nangong Juyun. Could it be that the two of the 10 great young masters were going to clash now? Chapter 1342. Before knowing Yi Guqin's identity, everyone thought that he was courting death by provoking Nangong Yuan. But now, no one thought that Yi Guqin had done anything wrong. Nangong Yuan was indeed not qualified to provoke Yi Guqin. At the same time, Yi Guqin's actions also pointed the spearhead to Nangong Juyun, the master behind Nangong Yuan. Is the rumor true? Is Yi Guqin going to fight Nangong Juyun because of Bang Tianfeng? Many people looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. The relationship between Bang Tianfeng and Yi Guqin was no longer a secret. Although the two of them had not formally acknowledged each other as their master, Yi Guqin was already Bang Tianfeng's disciple in everyone's eyes. However, compared to Yi Guqin's reputation in sword principle, as for his smithing path, there were not many praiseworthy things about it. As for the commotion caused by the heavenly craftsman path, it was because the female disciple did not record Yi Guqin's identity. Therefore, the entire heavenly craftsman city did not know that the mysterious 6-star forging genius was Yi Guqin. I think it's possible. Yi Guqin wouldn't come to the heavenly craftsman city for no reason. He must have his reasons. Is there a need to think about it? He must be here for the selection of the young sect master of the divine weapon sect. But this is not a martial arts competition. Yi Guqin doesn't seem to have anything praiseworthy in smithing Dao. I don't know. Maybe Yi Guqin will run into a wall. But no matter what, I'm a little interested. A divine weapon young master and a sword young master. If the two of them compete, it must be very interesting. Everyone present was whispering to each other. At this moment, Nangong Yuan was in a difficult position. He even wanted to die. If he really wrote such an IOU, it was hard to imagine how furious Nangong Juyun would be. Although Nangong Juyun usually looked elegant, he was like the king of hell when he was angry. However, if he did not sign it, he would not be able to get through the current crisis. This ye's patience is limited. Yi Guchen stared at Nangong Yuan. Although he did not emit the slightest bit of oppressive might, the psychological pressure was enough to completely crush Nangong Yuan. I'll write it, okay? Nangong Yuan had a long face, but he still signed the IOU and stamped it with a bloody handprint. Tell your master to bring the sky crystal on the day of the young sect master selection. Yi Guchen waved his hand and said, Nangong Yuan's body was like a piece of wood, and his heart was like dead ashes. He left as if he had lost his parents. The crowd fell silent as they watched Nangong Yuan's miserable fate. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Only after meeting Yi Guchen in person did they realize that the rumors were true. Even if Nangong Juyun was standing in front of him, Yi Guchen would probably dare to slash him with his sword. And you guys, cut my 2 sacred materials as soon as possible, Yi Guchen said calmly. Of course. Although Lu Xian's heart was bleeding, she still forced a smile on her charming face. She had no choice. She could not afford to offend Yi Guchen, nor could she afford to offend the entire Million Treasures house. At this moment, Gu Xiangling stepped forward and said with a smile, I heard the little red bird say that its young master is very powerful. Xiangling thought it was bragging, but now it seems that Xiangling was short-sighted. Ha, Brother Eagle and the others are also talking nonsense. I'm not that powerful. Yi Guchen smiled faintly. Yi Guchen had a good impression of Gu Xiangling. She had a good temper. Young Master Yi is so humble. There are millions of geniuses in the South Horizon region, but you're the only one who can severely injure Di Haotian. Gu Xiangling's eyes were also filled with curiosity. She had grown up in the Divine Artifact sect and was doted on. She had never traveled the world. Therefore, her biggest hobby, other than cutting stones, was listening to storytellers tell stories about geniuses who rose to prominence. Yi Guchen's experience was also legendary. This was because Gu Xiangling was very interested in Yi Guchen's story. Looking at Gu Xiangling's sparkling eyes, Song Feichen felt extremely sullen and uncomfortable. He felt as if his head was glowing. He was Gu Xiangling's childhood friend. Although Gu Xiangling had always kept a distance from him, Song Feichen believed that Gu Xiangling would definitely be with him. Oh right, young Master Yi Xiangling is very curious. How did you choose the stones? Gu Xiangling asked. All right. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. Although he could not explain the chaotic soul power, Yi Guchen had indeed found some ways to identify the stones. Next, Yi Guchen and Gu Xiangling discussed cutting stones together. The more Gu Xiangling talked, the closer she got to Yi Guchen. In the end, half of her body was almost pressed against Yi Guchen's arm. This time, everyone in the Thousand Treasures house had a strange look on their faces. Originally, Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen were fighting over Gu Xiangling. But now, Yi Guchen had appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, it seemed that Gu Xiangling was rather interested in him. Many people pitted Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen. This was simply a cuckold falling from the sky. Song Feichen clenched his fists tightly. If he did not know Yi Guchen's identity, he would have already attacked. But now, he did not dare to be impudent towards Yi Guchen. Therefore, Song Feichen only said with a stiff face, Xiangling, shouldn't we return to the sect? Gu Xiangling did not even turn her head. You go back first. I still want to interact more with young Master Yi. Interact more? How? A smile that all men understood appeared on the faces of all the male warriors present at the same time. Song Feichen's face turned green, and his body trembled. In the end, he turned around and left sullenly. Yi Guchen, just you wait. What's the use of having a high martial strength? When the young sect master selection comes, I will let you know that forging strength is the most important. Song Feichen thought viciously in his heart. He would get back the face he had lost today at the young sect master selection. On the other side, the master of the Thousand Treasures house had also finished cutting the heavenly tribulation blue gold and void mother gold. He respectfully handed them to Yiguchen. In addition, there were all sorts of supreme-grade treasures, including the treasures cut by Nangong Yuan, which also belonged to Yiguchen. In addition to the Daluo void incineration flame, Yiguchen could be said to have gained a lot this time. Not to mention, there was also an IOU of 30 million heaven crystals. Not only did Yiguchen not lose anything, but he also made a killing. Just as Yiguchen was about to leave the Thousand Treasures house, Gu Xiangling suddenly asked, "Young Master Yi, did you come this time because of martial uncle Duan Tianfeng?" Duan Tianfeng used to have a high status in the Divine Artifact sect, second only to the sect master. Therefore, Gu Xiangling also called him martial uncle. Yiguchen nodded slightly. "Young Master Yi, are you going to participate in the young sect master selection?" Gu Xiangling continued to ask. "That's right," Yiguchen said truthfully. There was nothing to hide. The divine eagle on his shoulder laughed and said, "Pretty sister, I told you that young Master Yi will definitely help you. You don't have to marry someone you don't like." Gu Xiangling shook her head slightly. Even if it was Yiguchen, Gu Xiangling was not sure that he could win. Nangong Jueyun's forging strength was unpredictable. By the way, young Master Yi, if you really want to participate in the young sect master selection, you should first challenge the heavenly craftsman path. Gu Xiangling thought of this and said, "I've already done it," Yiguchen said. "Is that so?" Gu Xiangling nodded slightly. She did not ask about the result. They didn't connect Yiguchen, the 6-star forging genius who had caused a stir in the city, with Yiguchen right away. Chapter 1343. This was because Yiguchen had made a name for himself as a sword cultivator. Everyone knew that he was a prodigy with extremely strong combat strength. However, not many people knew how skilled Yiguchen was in forging. Even though Yiguchen had displayed his forging skills a few times before, they were all in the Saint Origin dynasty. Something that happened in a low-level dynasty wouldn't cause much of a stir. Therefore, there were almost no rumors about Yiguchen's forging in the South Horizon region. That was why Gu Xiangling didn't connect the 6-star forging genius to Yiguchen. Yiguchen didn't take the initiative to say anything either. It wasn't that he was trying to hide it, but that Yiguchen didn't think that it was something worth showing off. Seeing that Yiguchen didn't say anything, everyone knew what was going on. I don't think Yiguchen's result in the Heavenly Craftsman path will be too good. He's a disciple of the Heavenly Craftsman sect. Even if he doesn't specialize in forging, he should be a 3-star forging master. Maybe a 4-star forging master. A monster like Yiguchen can't be judged by common sense. Even so, he's far from being Nangong Jueyun's match. He can't even compare to Song Feichen. In terms of strength, there was nothing to say about Yiguchen. He was definitely the top existence in the South Horizon region. However, in terms of forging, Yiguchen didn't have much of an influence. There were even some old forging masters who thought that Yiguchen was just a disciple of the Heavenly Craftsman sect. As for his true forging skills, it was still up for debate. Gu Xiangling didn't think too much about it. She smiled and said, "Then I hope young Master Yi succeeds. Perhaps our Divine Artifact sect will be able to breathe a sigh of relief then." Gu Xiangling wasn't stupid. If Nangong Jueyun obtained the position of Junior Sect Master, it was easy to imagine what would happen to Divine Artifact sect in the future. Even her father, the Sect Master of Divine Artifact sect, didn't want Nangong Jueyun to take the position. However, due to Xiao Gongshu's status, even the Sect Master of the Divine Artifact sect could not deprive Nangong Jueyun of his opportunity to participate for no reason. "Okay, goodbye." Yiguchen nodded. He had come to the Heavenly Craftsmanship City for this matter. Just as Yiguchen turned to leave, Gu Xiangling bit her moist red lips and said, "Young Master Yi, can you tell Xiangling some of your stories?" Truthfully speaking, Gu Xiangling was extremely curious about this sword young master that had risen up from a low-level dynasty. Yiguchen stopped in his tracks. To tell the truth, he still wanted to refine the all-heaven void incineration flame after returning to the inn, so he didn't have the time to spare. Seeing the expression on Yiguchen's face, The divine eagle on his shoulder patted its head. What an iron-willed straight man. Even when a girl invites him out, he still looks annoyed. The divine condor was exasperated. Can't I? Seeing Yi Guchen's frown, Gu Xiangling's tone softened. To tell the truth, she didn't expect Yi Guchen to show such an attitude. It wasn't that Gu Xiangling was arrogant, but she knew that her appearance, figure and family background were all top-notch. Countless prodigies flocked to her. Even someone as noble as Nangong Ju-yun thought that Gu Xiangling was a match for him. Yi Guchen was the first person to show such an attitude to her. Everyone looked at Yi Guchen with envy, jealousy, and hatred when they heard Gu Xiangling's soft and pitiful tone. Even Nangong Ju-yun and Song Feichen had probably never seen Gu Xiangling like this before. Yi Guchen thought for a while and nodded slightly. He still had some thoughts about the divine artifact sect. If he could win over Gu Xiangling, it would be beneficial for him. Hearing this, Gu Xiangling smiled brightly like a mountain flower. Then, Yi Guchen and Gu Xiangling returned to the inn. What happened at the Pavilion of Treasures soon spread across the entire heavenly craftsmanship city. Hey, have you heard that Yi Guchen, the main character of the Battle of the Holy Emperor universe that caused a stir recently, has shown up? Yes, there was a rumor that Yi Guchen was Bang Tianfeng's disciple. Does that mean that Yi Guchen might also interfere with the selection of the future master of the divine artifact sect? That's possible. But I've never heard that Yi Guchen has any talent in forging. Hey, do you think that the mysterious six-star forging genius that caused a sensation in the heavenly craftsmanship road is Yi Guchen? Are you kidding? Yi Guchen is already a freak in martial arts. If he has such talent in forging, then he is not human. Yes, it must be a coincidence. All the restaurants, tea houses, and inns in the heavenly craftsmanship city were talking about Yi Guchen's appearance. On the other side, inside an exquisite and luxurious palace, Nangong Yuan was kneeling on the ground. His face was pale and he was trembling. A handsome man in a cyan robe with cloud patterns was standing in front of him. He had a jade crown and his hair was tied up. It was none other than Nangong Jueyun. At this moment, Nangong Jueyun was expressionless. Golden and silver flames were dancing in his eyes. The deathly silence made Nangong Yuan even more terrified. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead and dripped down along the bridge of his nose. Well done, Yi Guchen. After a long while, Nangong Jueyun finally spat out these words. To be honest, Nangong Jueyun didn't expect that Yi Guchen would really come to the heavenly craftsmanship city and get involved in this mess. He also didn't expect that Yi Guchen would directly target him. As for Nangong Yuan, he just happened to be in Yi Guchen's line of fire. Young master, please spare my life. I was too stupid and offended Yi Guchen. I deserve to die. Nangong Yuan kept kowtowing. He knew very well that Nangong Jueyun was usually gentle and easygoing. However, when he was truly enraged, he was like a demon god. You do deserve to die. Not only did you waste the 20 million heaven crystals I gave you, you even wrote an IOU of 30 million heaven crystals. However, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you've embarrassed the Nangong family. You've embarrassed me, Nangong Jueyun. Nangong Jueyun's handsome face was as cold as frost. Young master, please spare my life. Young master, please spare my life. Nangong Yuan's heart beat violently. He had a bad feeling. Nangong Jueyun didn't say anything else. He waved his hand. A dazzling silver-colored flame surged out, causing the temperature in the hall to drop abruptly. The silver flame directly wrapped around Nangong Yuan. Nangong Yuan didn't even have time to scream. After the flame dissipated, Nangong Yuan's figure was revealed. His body was strangely intact. However, his vitality had been extinguished, and his skin was covered with a layer of frost. This kind of strange flame was actually like cold air, freezing Nangong Yuan's entire body into an ice sculpture. Even the clothes on his body were intact. This also showed how exquisite Nangong Jueyun's control of the flame was. Nangong Jueyun waved his sleeve, and Nangong Yuan's lifeless body was annihilated and turned into dust. Yi Guchen, since you've chosen to get involved in this mess, you should be prepared to drown. Gold and silver flames flickered in Nangong Jueyun's eyes. Let's go find my master first, Nangong Jueyun muttered. His master was none other than the Beiyan device emperor, Master Xiao. Chapter 1344. The news of Yi Guqin's appearance spread like wildfire in the entire heavenly craftsmanship city. At this moment, Yi Guqin, who was in the eye of the storm, had returned to his room in the inn. Gu Xiangling had returned as well. Yi Guqin also briefly talked about his experience. However, he did not talk about Yi Guqin's secrets or personal feelings. Yi Guqin did not talk about them. Even so, Yi Guqin's experience was legendary and magnificent. Mr. Yi, Xiangling now understands why those heaven's favorites who were born in different dynasties view you as their idol. Gu Xiangling stared at Yi Guqin. Her eyes, which were as clear as a lake, sparkled. The reason why Yi Guqin had such a huge influence was largely because of his birth. He had risen from a lowly dynasty to the present, where he had even killed the geniuses from overlord forces. This kind of hot-bloodedness that rose from humble beginnings to counterattack resonated with the vast majority of ordinary martial artists. Compared to those geniuses from overlord forces who were born high and mighty, Yi Guqin was the true portrayal of many geniuses from dynasties. Miss Gu, you're overpraising me. I've never thought of myself as great. It's just that I can't calm down, Yi Guqin said indifferently. From the beginning to the end, he had never thought of what he had done as great. It was just an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Looking at Yi Guqin's carefree appearance, Gu Xiangling suddenly felt that Yi Guqin had not come to heavenly craftsmanship city without any preparation. Thinking of this, Gu Xiangling said, although Xiangling doesn't know how great young Master Ye's forging skills are, if young Master Yi really wants to compete with Nangong Jueyun, you must do one thing. What is it? Yi Guqin's eyes flickered. He did not waste his time on Gu Xiangling for nothing. As expected, the daughter of the Divine Weapon sect master knew something. Young Master Yi, there's a heavenly cauldron in the Divine Weapon sect, Gu Xiangling said. Celestial cauldron? Yi Guqin looked puzzled. He didn't know much about Divine Artifact sect. Gu Xiangling explained patiently, the heavenly cauldron is actually an active volcano. It contains a special existence, the 10,000-year fire spirit. The reason why Divine Artifact sect is able to forge so many divine artifacts on a daily basis is largely due to the 10,000-year fire spirit, said Gu Xiangling. Hearing Gu Xiangling's words, Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. He asked, then what's the connection between this 10,000-year fire spirit and the young sect master selection? Gu Xiangling said, the final competition of the young lord selection will be held on the heavenly cauldron. If you want to forge a superior divine weapon, you must borrow the power of the 10,000 years fire spirit. In other words, if young Master Yi wants to defeat Nangong Jueyun, you must work hard on the 10,000-year fire spirit. Gu Xiangling's words enlightened Yi Guqin. The 10,000-year fire spirit clearly possessed extraordinary power. If he borrowed its power, he might be able to raise the quality of his divine weapon. Gu Xiangling continued, that Nangong Jueyun and senior brother Song Feichen will do everything they can to draw on the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. If young Master Yi doesn't want to be at a disadvantage, you must do so as well. Thank you for your warning, Miss Gu. This information is indeed very important to me. Yi Guqin cupped his fists towards Gu Xiangling sincerely. Young Master Yi is too polite. This information isn't really a secret, Gu Xiangling said with a smile. She continued, since you've said so much, Xiangling won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first. Yi Guqin nodded slightly, then sent Gu Xiangling out of the inn. Gu Xiangling walked alone on the street and sighed softly in her heart. Yi Guqin, do you really have the ability to defeat Nangong Jueyun? In terms of martial strength, perhaps Yi Guqin had a chance. However, in terms of forging, no matter how highly Gu Xiangling thought of Yi Guqin, she found it hard to believe that he could compare to Nangong Jueyun. Yi Guqin also obtained the Daluo Void Incineration Flame. However, this kind of supreme-grade rare flame is not so easy to refine, Gu Xiangling thought to herself. In the room, after sending Gu Xiangling off, Yi Guchen could finally free up some time to prepare. 10,000-year fire spirit, huh? This is indeed important information, Yi Guchen pondered. It was obvious that the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit had an extremely strong supporting effect on weapon forging. Nangong Ju Yun and Song Feichen clearly wanted to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Yi Guchen wanted to forge his own sword. If he could borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit, his chances of success would be much higher. Furthermore, earth, water, fire, and wind. I've already passed the earth and water tribulations. According to the order, the fire tribulations should be next. Fire tribulations? 10,000-year fire spirit. Yi Guchen muttered to himself, his eyes flickering. No matter what, I need to refine the Daluo void incineration flame at this stage. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered. With a flip of his wrist, he took out the container that sealed the Daluo void incineration flame. Even though the container was engraved with a sealing formation, the scorching heat still passed through the container and into Yi Guchen's hand. If I can successfully refine the Daluo void incineration flame, my forging ability should increase explosively again. Without the slightest hesitation, Yi Guchen began to prepare to refine the Daluo void incineration flame. Ordinary people would have to be extremely careful when refining such a supreme-grade rare flame. After all, the slightest carelessness could result in a charred corpse. In the past, there had been no lack of examples of pill refiners and blacksmiths suffering a backlash when refining rare flames. However, this was nothing to Yi Guchen. The quality of his physical body far surpassed that of ordinary martial artists. Thus, Yi Guchen's body could endure greater pressure and damage without collapsing. This was also one of the benefits of cultivating the physical body. Let's begin. Yi Guchen consumed a few frost attribute pills and treasured medicines such as the frost moonflower and the ice spirit pill. His entire body seemed to have turned into an ice sculpture, exuding cold air. Afterward, Yi Guchen opened the container. True energy surged out and wrapped around the Daluo void incineration flame spark. The blazing white flame sizzled as it scorched his true energy. The Daluo void incineration flame was known as an ultimate flame that could even incinerate the void. Burning his true energy was naturally nothing difficult. However, Yi Guchen's true energy was simply too vigorous. Even if the Daluo void incineration flame incessantly burned, it couldn't be completely consumed in an instant. Yi Guchen did not hesitate. He opened his mouth and swallowed the origin of the Daluo void incineration flame in one gulp. In an instant, Yi Guchen felt as if he'd swallowed a sun. The terrifying heat immediately dispersed the cold air. Yi Guchen's body was quickly charred black. The scorching pain spread throughout Yi Guchen's body. His body, however, remained unmoving like an old monk in meditation. At the same time, the pitch-black heart demon flame wrapped around the Daluo void incineration flame and began to assist in refining it. Yi Guchen completely immersed himself in refining the flame. As time passed, the day of the Junior Sect Master Selection of Divine Artifact Sect drew closer and closer. Chapter 1345. The atmosphere in Heavenly Craftsmanship City grew increasingly heated as time passed. After all, the selection of the Junior Sect Master of Divine Artifact Sect was no child's play. It was a major event. Whoever won the position of Junior Sect Master would become the Sect Master of Divine Artifact Sect in the future. One could say that the Sect Master of Divine Artifact Sect's status was no lower than that of the major figures of the Overlord factions. Moreover, many people knew that if Nangong Jueyun really did become the Junior Sect Master of Divine Artifact Sect, in the future, Divine Artifact Sect would practically become a subsidiary faction of the Nangong family. Duan Tianfeng returned to the inn a few days later. However, after hearing from the Divine Condor that Yi Guchen was in seclusion, Duan Tianfeng chose not to disturb Yi Guchen. Not only did you obtain 2 sacred materials, but you even obtained a supreme natural flame like the Origin Void Incineration. Yi Guchen, you really didn't disappoint me. Even Duan Tianfeng was stunned for a moment after learning of Yi Guchen's deeds at the Myriad Treasures workshop. Then he shook his head and smiled. The wisest decision he'd ever made in his life was choosing Yi Guchen as his disciple. Master Xiao has lost the selection of the junior sect master. It's time we put an end to our bet. Also, Duan Tianfeng paused. A hint of reminiscence and gentleness appeared on his weathered face. Huajing, Duan Tianfeng murmured. But when he remembered that Nangong Huajing was now Xiao Gongshu's wife, a look of suppressed pain appeared in his eyes. Nangong Huajing was the beauty of the Nangong family. She'd once studied the art of forging in Divine Artifact sect and had hit it off with Duan Tianfeng. But then Xiao Gongshu had interfered. In the end, the two turned against each other and began a duel with forging as the wager. Duan Tianfeng had lost his reputation, his future, and her in that bet. He'd been utterly defeated. But Duan Tianfeng had never understood why he'd lost. His forging skills were no weaker than Xiao Gongshu's. But what was done could not be undone. It was useless for Duan Tianfeng to think about it now. His only hope now was that Yi Guchen could turn the tables. Can Yi Guchen successfully refine the Daluo void incineration flame? A hint of worry appeared in Duan Tianfeng's eyes. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Yi Guchen's abilities. However, the exalted void incineration flame was one of the most supreme flames of the world. Not to mention Yi Guchen, even some of the older generation experts would be at risk of being injured or even dying in the face of such top-level flames. A few days passed amidst such worries. Today was finally the day of the junior master selection of Divine Artifact sect. The whole heavenly craftsmanship city was in an uproar. Countless people converged toward Divine Artifact sect space like rivers flowing into the sea. The junior sect master selection of Divine Artifact sect was open and transparent, so outsiders were allowed to watch. At this moment, everyone from the First Elders faction was gathered in a great hall in Divine Artifact sect, led by Yang Qi. Song Feichen and the other forging geniuses of Divine Artifact sect stood respectfully with their hands at their sides. You are all people of our faction who have placed great hopes in. I hope you won't disappoint this old man, Yang Qi said gravely. Don't worry, we won't disappoint the First Elder. Song Feichen cupped his hands, his eyes brimming with fighting spirit and confidence. He was young, but he was already a 5-star forging master. His future was limitless. The junior sect master selection this time was his stage to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Neither Nangong Jueyun nor Yi Guchen had the right to take Gu Xiangling away from him. Moreover, I was fortunate enough to obtain that treasure. It will definitely help me borrow the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. When the time comes, I will become the junior sect master of Divine Artifact sect, and Xiangling will completely submit to me. Song Feichen thought to himself with wild ambition. He had always been the first senior brother of Divine Artifact sect, so he was the most suitable candidate for the position of junior sect master. As for Nangong Jueyun, he had a transcendent status in Divine Artifact sect. However, he was a member of the Nangong family. This meant that many elders of Divine Artifact sect didn't want Nangong Jueyun to become the junior sect master. There's also the Yi Guchen. I will prove myself through the junior sect master selection and gain Xiangling's favor. You, on the other hand, are just a spectator, Song Feichen thought coldly. However, he immediately recalled the mysterious 6-star forging genius that had appeared in the Heavenly Craftsman Road recently. Who is that monster? He's comparable to Nangong Jueyun. Fortunately, he didn't come to Divine Artifact sect. Song Feichen shook his head. In another hall of Divine Artifact sect. The hall was very spacious and there were only 2 people in it. One of them was a handsome man wearing a blue robe embroidered with clouds. It was Nangong Jueyun. In front of him was a tall middle-aged man wearing a dark golden robe. He had a white face without a beard and looked handsome. Although he was middle-aged, he still had a graceful bearing and gave off a dignified aura. This man was the famous 8-star forging grandmaster of the South Horizon region, the artifact sovereign of Bian, Xiao Gongshu. That Duan Tianfeng really doesn't give up. Wouldn't it be better for him to live in seclusion? He just has to come back to Divine Artifact Sect to humiliate himself. Xiao Gongshu stood with his hands behind his back with a cold expression. Master is right. So what if Duan Tianfeng comes? He'll only embarrass himself. Moreover, it's ridiculous that he wants to rely on Yi Guqin to recover some lost ground. Nangong Jueyun chuckled. I've heard of Yi Guqin recently, but he hasn't made any achievements in forging. I don't know where Duan Tianfeng gets his confidence from. Xiao Gongshu shook his head slightly. Maybe Yi Guqin didn't even pass the Heavenly Craftsman Road. If that's the case, he doesn't even have the right to participate. Nangong Jueyun said. Jueyun, no matter what, you have to do your best. If you can really become the junior sect master of Divine Artifact Sect, I'll do my best to help you become the sect master in the future. At that time, Divine Artifact Sect will be a fish on the chopping block. Xiao Gongshu smiled deeply. Xiao Gongshu didn't have much of a sense of belonging to the sect that nurtured him. What he wanted was absolute power. Above him, there was still the sect master of Divine Artifact Sect. At the same time, in a quiet courtyard in Divine Artifact Sect's territory, a father and daughter were standing there. The woman was wearing an apricot-colored dress. Her features were picturesque and her skin was white as snow. She was Gu Xiangling. The green-robed man in front of her had a square face and an elegant temperament. He looked like a scholar. This person was the sect master of Divine Artifact Sect, Gu Beihan. Father, is there really no way? Gu Xiangling bit her lips. She really didn't want to marry Nangong Jueyun. The junior sect master selection is about to begin. It can't be stopped. The only hope now is that you and Song Feichen can defeat Nangong Jueyun. However, this possibility is too small. Gu Beihan shook his head. Father, you may have missed someone. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes narrowed as she spoke. Gu Beihan's eyes flashed. Sword Prince Yi Guqin, Gu Xiangling said with certainty. Chapter 1346. Yi Guqin? Is he the Jin Kuei from the Sword Dynasty who caused a stir in the Nantian region recently? Gu Beihan asked. He had also heard about Yi Guqin's incident. That's right. Yi Guqin has also inherited martial uncle Duan Tianfeng's legacy. He can be considered his disciple, Gu Xiangling said. But how good is Yi Guqin in terms of smithing? Gu Beihan asked. Only Duan Tianfeng and Yang Qi knew that Yi Guqin had challenged the Heaven's Works path. However, they did not tell Gu Beihan about it. Therefore, Gu Beihan did not know much about Duan Tianfeng's disciple. Xiangling doesn't know either. However, I feel that Yi Guqin might be able to surprise us, Gu Xiangling said. Gu Beihan's eyes flickered as he looked at Gu Xiangling. I've also heard about the Thousand Treasures House. You seem to be getting along well with Yi Guqin. Could it be that you, Gu Xiangling blushed when she heard Gu Beihan's words. Father, what are you talking about? We've only known each other for a short time. How could I? Is that so? That's good. You should know that Yi Guqin is indeed outstanding. However, he's currently a hot potato. Even an overlord-level force would have trouble trying to recruit him, let alone our divine weapon sect. Gu Beihan shook his head. Gu Xiangling clenched her fists and asked, Father, Yi Guqin really came to participate in the junior sect master selection and even succeeded in the end. Father, are you not going to keep your promise? Gu Beihan was slightly taken aback when he heard Gu Xiangling's words. To be honest, he had never thought of such a thing. This was because Gu Beihan believed that it was impossible. No matter how good Yi Guqin's smithing skills were, it was impossible for him to be better than Nangong Jueyun and Song Feichen. I don't think that's possible, Gu Beihan said calmly. I'm talking about if... Gu Xiangling continued to question him. Then let's see if he can make me see him in a different light, Gu Beihan said indifferently with his hands behind his back. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't reject it either. He didn't give a definite answer. Seeing Gu Beihan's undecided attitude, Gu Xiangling sighed inwardly. She had already done everything she could. She could only hope that Yi Guqin would be able to surprise her. Over at the inn, Duan Tianfeng had been waiting outside. At this time, There was a sudden vibration in the room. Duan Tianfeng's heart skipped a beat. A moment later, the door was pushed open and Yi Guchen walked out in a black robe with an indifferent expression. There was nothing wrong with his body except for his slightly pale face. Yi Guchen. Mo Tianfeng looked at Yi Guchen from head to toe. Yi Guchen's lips curled into a faint smile. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In a split second, a cluster of white flames rose from Yi Guchen's fingertip. The surrounding air twisted and the temperature rose slightly. Have you completely refined the Daluo void incineration flame? Duan Tianfeng asked in surprise. Of course, Yi Guchen said with a faint smile. Duan Tianfeng had an incredulous expression. The Daluo void incineration flame was a supreme-grade rare flame. In terms of grade, it was on par with the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire. Back then, Duan Tianfeng had spent a lot of effort to refine the Purple Emperor's heavenly fire. But now, Yi Guchen had refined the Daluo void incineration flame so easily. This surprised Duan Tianfeng. Although he was surprised, Duan Tianfeng still smiled in relief. Yi Guchen had already passed the Heavenly Craftsman path and obtained the 6-star Forging Master's token. Now that he had refined the Daluo void incineration flame, his forging skills would definitely increase exponentially. This way, his chances of winning the Junior Sect Master selection would be much higher. To tell you the truth, I don't even know what level your forging skills have reached. Duan Tianfeng sighed with a smile. Senior, please don't worry. I will definitely settle this bet for you, Yi Guchen said in a serious tone. Duan Tianfeng had done him a favor. He would repay this favor. Good. The Junior Sect Master selection is about to begin. Let's go to the Divine Artifact Sect. Duan Tianfeng smiled in relief. Yi Guchen could win this battle. That meant that the Southern Forging Sacred Hand was about to make a comeback. A huge plaza in Divine Artifact Sect was currently filled with a sea of people and a hubbub of noise. Most of the Divine Artifact Sect's disciples, elders, and upper echelons were gathered here. In addition, there were tens of thousands of cultivators from various factions and independent cultivators who had come to spectate. They filled the entire plaza. The Junior Sect Master selection of the Divine Artifact Sect is a rare event. Yes, although the Divine Artifact Sect isn't an Overlord-level faction, its influence isn't much weaker than an Overlord-level faction. But if nothing unexpected happens, Nangong Ju Yun will be the winner of the Junior Sect Master selection this time, right? Yes, I think so too. Sigh. A mysterious 6-star forging genius appeared in the Heavenly Craftsman path a few days ago. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have any plans to come to the Divine Artifact Sect. Yes, what a pity. Otherwise, we might be able to see a fierce battle. Many cultivators were discussing this from all directions. However, most people believed that this stage belonged to Nangong Juyun alone. Whether it was Gu Xiangling or Song Feichen, they were just side characters. The sect master has arrived. At this moment, a group of people appeared. The man in the lead was dressed like a scholar. He was the sect master of the Divine Artifact Sect, Gu Beihan. Beside him was a beautiful girl in an apricot-colored dress. Her skin was smooth, and her eyebrows were drawn like ink. She was so beautiful that she seemed to have walked out of a landscape painting. It was Gu Xiangling. At this moment, Gu Xiangling had a melancholy look on her face. She was like a little girl that made one's heart ache. This day had finally come. Although Nangong Juyun might be a perfect match for other women. However, Gu Xiangling knew that Nangong Juyun only agreed to marry her because of benefits. If Nangong Juyun really became the junior sect master, then Gu Xiangling's future treatment would be obvious. She would definitely become a plaything in Nangong Juyun's hands. This was something that Gu Xiangling did not want to see. Therefore, even if she had to rely on her own strength, Gu Xiangling had to think of a way to stop Nangong Juyun. At this moment, First Elder Yang Qi's people had also arrived, including Song Feichen and the others, who were following closely behind. Yang Qi, you're here, Gu Beihan said. Sect Master, is Xiao Gongshu not here yet? Yang Qi looked around. He has always been arrogant. Of course, he has to be the last to show up. Gu Beihan smiled calmly. How could he not know about Xiao Gongshu's ambition? However, Xiao Gongshu had grown to this point. He was no longer someone that a sect master like him could control. Moreover, Xiao Gongshu's wife was Nangong Huajing of the Nangong family. Xiao Gongshu was considered half a member of the Nangong family. It was because of this that Gu Beihan could not use his authority as the sect master to control Xiao Gongshu. At this moment, the crowd in the distant square suddenly parted. A group of people arrived with a majestic aura. Aren't they here now? A cold light flashed in Gu Beihan's eyes. Chapter 1347. Everyone looked over at the same time. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man in a dark golden robe. His face was pale and he had a handsome figure. He had a dignified aura. It was Xiao Gongshu. Beside him, Nangong Ju-yun was wearing a green robe with cloud patterns. His hair was tied up with a jade crown, and his expression was calm. There were gold and silver flames dancing in his eyes. Nangong Ju-yun is here. As expected of one of the 10 great young masters, a peerless genius who cultivates both martial skills and blacksmithing skills. Many of the girls present looked at Nangong Ju-yun with splendor in their eyes. One had to admit that Nangong Ju-yun's image in the outside world was indeed elegant and easygoing. Only those who truly understood Nangong Ju-yun would know how temperamental he was. Apart from Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Ju-yun, there was also a beautiful middle-aged woman who attracted many gazes. The beautiful woman was wearing a palace dress. She was beautiful and had a delicate aura. She was none other than Nangong Huajing of the Nangong family. She was Xiao Gongshu's wife. Nangong Huajing had come today to witness Nangong Ju-yun obtain the position of young sect master. After all, Nangong Ju-yun was the genius of the Nangong family. As a member of the Nangong family, Nangong Huajing would naturally side with her own genius. Sect master. Xiao Gongshu's tone was indifferent as he nodded at Gu Beihan. Gu Beihan was expressionless when he saw Xiao Gongshu's indifferent attitude. Nangong Ju-yun glanced at Gu Xiangling and smiled faintly. Xiangling, I believe it will be our good days soon. Gu Xiangling felt nauseous when she saw the gentle smile on Nangong Ju-yun's face. She had never seen such a hypocritical person. Nangong Ju-yun's eyes narrowed when he saw that Gu Xiangling did not reply. He then said, I heard that you and Yiguchen had a good chat. Gu Xiangling's eyelashes trembled slightly. She then looked up and said, So what? Nothing. I just wanted to tell you that Yiguchen will definitely not survive Sky Burial Island. There's no need for you to have any relationship with a person who will definitely die, Nangong Ju-yun said with a smile. Hearing Nangong Ju-yun's words that were filled with gunpowder, everyone present understood. Nangong Ju-yun was probably going to clash with Yiguchen. However, at this moment, a chuckle suddenly sounded. What right does a debtor have to gossip behind other people's backs? The hearts of everyone present shook when they heard this voice, and then they suddenly turned their gazes over. Two figures slowly walked into the square from outside Divine Artifact Sect. The person who spoke was a handsome young man in a black robe. He had a playful expression on his face, and it was none other than Yiguchen. It's Yiguchen. He really showed himself. So he's Yiguchen? Just like the rumors say, he has the bearing of a king among geniuses. No wonder he could kill Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion and become one of the top 10 young masters. Yiguchen's arrival caused an uproar among the crowd. After all, Yiguchen was probably the most talked about genius in the South Sky region recently. Beside Yiguchen was Duan Tianfeng. That must be the former Southern Forging Saint Hand. Sigh, who would have thought that Duan Tianfeng, who was once as famous as Xiao Gongshu, would become so old? Many cultivators who knew the secret of the past sighed inwardly. Yiguchen? Nangong Ju-yun stared at Yiguchen and narrowed his eyes slightly. This was the first time the two of them had met. However, before they met, there was already a grudge between them. Moreover, even without the incident with the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion, Based on the grudge between Xiao Gongshu and Duan Tianfeng, the two of them were destined to be enemies. Duan Tianfeng, I didn't think that you would really dare to come back. Xiao Gongshu glanced at Yi Guchen indifferently before his gaze fell on Duan Tianfeng, who was beside Yi Guchen. Duan Tianfeng also looked at Xiao Gongshu and their gazes met. Southern Forging Saint Hand. Beiyan Artifact Monarch. The two great forging geniuses of the Divine Artifact sect clashed again today. However, Duan Tianfeng's gaze didn't linger on Xiao Gongshu for too long. His gaze trembled slightly as he looked at the beautiful woman standing next to Xiao Gongshu. Hua Jing. Duan Tianfeng, who had always been carefree, was somewhat reserved at this moment. At the same time, there was a hint of pain in the depths of his eyes. One of the greatest pains in the world was when the one you loved was already someone else's wife. Are you really? Senior brother Duan? Nangong Huajing's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at the aged Bing Tianfeng. Duan Tianfeng was about the same age as Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing. However, both Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were middle-aged. Mo Tianfeng, on the other hand, was old and clumsy, looking down and out. From this, one could see what kind of life Duan Tianfeng had led over the years. When Yi Guchen first met Duan Tianfeng, it was because Duan Tianfeng couldn't afford to pay for the wine that Yi Guchen helped him out. Senior brother Duan, Huajing really didn't recognize you. After the initial surprise, Nangong Huajing's emotions didn't fluctuate too much. Perhaps she had hit it off with Duan Tianfeng in the past, but that was in the past. Now, she was Xiao Gongshu's wife. Duan Tianfeng was merely an old and decrepit man. Huajing, I never thought that I would be able to see you again one day. Duan Tianfeng sighed emotionally. His hands were even trembling slightly. Nangong Huajing sighed softly. Senior brother Duan, you shouldn't have come back. Duan Tianfeng's heart suddenly trembled at those words. He looked at Nangong Huajing. She was still as beautiful as ever. Time didn't seem to have left many traces on her. Instead, it made her more mature. However, she was no longer the innocent and delicate girl from the Nangong family who had just entered the Divine Artifact sect. Huajing. Duan Tianfeng's throat was choked. He thought that Nangong Huajing would at least miss him, if not be happy to see him. However, she didn't even miss him. He saw a sigh in Nangong Huajing's eyes. Yi Guchen couldn't help but frown at Nangong Huajing's attitude towards Duan Tianfeng. However, this was Duan Tianfeng's private matter. Yi Guchen didn't want to interfere. Nangong Huajing shook her head. Senior brother Duan, you're too stubborn. I've already gotten over it. Perhaps this is fate. You lost to Gongshu back then. That's fate. What's the point of bringing your disciple here today? He's not even a disciple of the Divine Artifact sect. How can he participate in the junior sect master selection, let alone compete with Zhu Yun? Nangong Huajing thought that Duan Tianfeng had returned to take revenge. He wanted his disciple to deal with Nangong Zhu Yun. However, Nangong Huajing didn't think that Yi Guchen was qualified to deal with Nangong Zhu Yun on the path of forging. Duan Tianfeng's face twitched when he heard someone from the past say such heartless and cold words. All these years he had drowned his sorrows in alcohol in order to forget Nangong Huajing. However, he couldn't forget her no matter what. However, Duan Tianfeng's heart was filled with desolation when he heard the woman of his dreams say such cold words. Finally, Yi Guchen couldn't sit by and watch. Who told you that I'm not a disciple of the Divine Artifact sect? Yi Guchen asked coldly as he looked at Nangong Huajing. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.